LDS worship a different god, or Brigham Young taught idolatry. Mariology, icon veneration, and of course, like what Vatican II teaches about Catholics having the same God or worshipping the same God as Muslims do. And of course, like there has been genuine contradiction between pre and post Vatican II theology. And there's a host of other issues as well that's problematic for, like, say, Joe and his shtick against Mormonism, which, based on that, he has read very little about the other side in terms of, like, primary documentation, scholarship, and apologetics, or if he has knowingly ignored that and presented, like, say, the worst case theology and presentation of our beliefs, while trying to, like, give the impression he's trying to be intellectually honest. He's really good at that. And he's been called up on that by some of his fellow Roman Catholics, such as DoorDash Thomist, and also like some others, like Anglican Aesthetics from YouTube has done a series of videos where Joe seems incapable of critical thought or representing the other side fairly. So that's my view. It shows like Joe is a low-tier Catholic apologist.
We do have Travis, who's joining us from his channel, Missionary Discussions. How are you doing, Travis? Can you hear us? Oh, I think you're muted.
I'm doing just dandy.
It's good to see you.
Glad to be alive.
Yeah. So before we hop in and start watching some of the clips, your general impressions of the interview between Matt and Joe.
So I've only seen clips. I haven't watched the entirety. So
okay.
I get Joe's argument in the sense that he's basically comparing us to some Eastern religions that are not that don't have a central deity of any kind. So and that's so like Buddhism, everybody achieves some kind of eternal felicity and some kind of a state of bliss and oneness with all of creation or whatever. And I think he's equating our understanding of progression with something like that. That's all I could gather, which is a really horrible straw man. And it negates our understanding of a God and a deity and basically everything in Latter-day Saint theology. So, and gratefully, I canceled my Daily Wire subscription in advance of that. And one of the reasons I did is they platformed. Have you guys seen the guy that claims he has a 200 IQ?
I can't say I have.
Oh,
Michael Knowles. Yeah,
Oh.
Michael Knowles. Oh. Michael Knowles did an interview with him, and the guy is, that I kind of said, if they're going to produce this kind of crap, maybe this isn't for me.
So I have not had a Daily Wire subscription for probably about 2 years now. And at the time, it wasn't for any particular reason, but as time has gone on since, I'm increasingly glad that I did. So with that said, I do want to mention too, originally I did have a hard out at 2 hours. That has softened. So I can probably go 2.5, 2 hours and 45 minutes max. So we shouldn't have too much of a problem there. Sam, who will be joining us, was gracious enough to put together some timestamps for us. So I don't have individual clips.
Oh, good.
But I do have some timestamps. He also put together some timestamps of Joe's live stream that he did, I believe, was it Thursday morning with Isaac Hess. So I did have a chance to watch that. I don't know, Robert, if you have any thoughts on that generally before, but we could probably save that for the end if we have time.
Yeah, I did watch some of it, and Hess, by the way, like, I challenged Hess to debate once he appeared on the Leela Rose show, and he pulled the I don't do public debates, but he's more than willing to go like on public platforms to like dump on the church. So here's the debate challenge. Joe and Isaac against me, and the thesis is the Immaculate Conception of Mary apostolic in origin? And I will grant him 50% extra time than me. So I'll have 20 minutes opening statement, they'll have 30, and so on and so forth. So if Joe wants to continue debating, let's debate Mariology. But on that, he was called up on his nonsense throughout it. Like Joseph Lowell was trying to correct him about like his misrepresentation, misinterpretation of the interview he had with Turk about natural theology, and he wasn't just listening. He wasn't listening. Again, like it shows like he doesn't care about correction. And if you're an apologist for any side, it shows intellectual honesty and integrity. If you are wrong, you admit to it. Like to give not all Catholic apologists are bad. Like my favorite Catholic apologist, or one of my favorite Catholic apologists, is Kevin Fernandez, who runs the Since 33 AD YouTube channel, and he had a video on Jerome and the episcopacy, and a Presbyterian responded to him, and he admitted like the Presbyterian battered him on that, so he admitted like I'm taking down the video, I was wrong, and he did it publicly. It's like that takes a lot of integrity. You know, I've been wrong about a number of things as well, and I'll happily admit to it. But Joe seems incapable of making any error, especially when it comes to, you know, the new religious movements or Mormons, you know. And I think in part it's because he didn't do as well as he was expecting to do against Jacob Hansen in Utah. So.
Yeah, he played it off as a misunderstanding of the debate topic that between him and Jacob. And he did say at the end of his discussion with Matt that he and Jacob had talked afterwards, and they went on Capturing Christianity and had their discussion there as well, and was able to smooth that over. But he did seem a little annoyed that Jacob's particular arguments were not even in the realm of discussion for him as far as the main debate topic was concerned. So it seems like he didn't even understand some general, general concepts of the great apostasy within Latter-day Saint thought. And the thing with the live stream too that he did with Isaac Hess, I wish he would have played full clips from Tarek and Joseph, because both of them gave some really good, solid meat and potatoes answers for things in their discussion on All Those in Favor with Caden Baylor. Anybody who hasn't seen that video, I think, should do themselves a favor and go watch Caden Baylor's episode they did with Tarek LaCour and Joseph Lawal responding as well, because they are coming at this as trained philosophers, and they're Joseph's answers for a lot of Joe's misunderstanding are quite good, and Joe just in his live stream just kind of took a little bite-sized clip and then doubled down, which means he either didn't understand really what Joseph was getting at, or didn't care, and was going to make his point anyway. Yeah, go ahead.
And just on that, he was called out by Joseph explicitly during the live chat, and also
that's right.
Joe is a former Roman Catholic seminarian, and from what I've been told, he's a graduate of the Angelicum. And some of my Roman Catholic friends, including some priests, you know, I'm actually friends with some priests, actually graduated from the Angelicum as well. It's one of, if not the top pontifical universities in the world. So he does have the philosophical, or at least he should have the philosophical chops to actually know this. So I think it's rather telling that you cannot tell this from his recent videos.
Yeah, and he didn't even give the full clip its due. He took like a 10-second clip and responded to it. And quite frankly, there was a lot more that Joseph said that should have been addressed by Joe that frankly didn't even get mentioned. So I don't have any, I'm not going to hold my breath, but it would be nice if Joe would actually have taken the time to listen to some of the full clips, the full points that Joseph and Tarek are making, and actually respond to them. So we'll see if he's willing to do that in the coming weeks, but I kind of doubt it. So with all that said,
I'm not going to hold my breath.
Yeah. I'm going to pull up the original video here with Matt and Joe. As I mentioned, we do have timestamps that I'll be going off of. provided by Sam, and I added one or two in there as well. Just for before we get into it, I'm going to share it and let me know if you guys can hear it, if you see it. You guys see it okay?
Yep.
Okay, I would play a couple seconds here and just kind of give me the thumbs up.
To cite chapter and verse. But what they don't have is philosophy. If somebody believes that you should worship Adam, that person is an idolater.
Do Mormons today agree with you that Brigham Young, in this sense, taught idolatry?
All right, all good?
Yeah.
Is that, how's the volume on it?
It's fine.
It's fine. Even if you don't have Thomistic philosophy.
Louder or quieter?
No,
maybe
good.
a bit louder if you could.
Yeah. I'd be worried about the audience. I'm wearing headphones and stuff, so it's probably more clear and loud for me than it is probably people are watching.
Let me turn it up a bit. Okay. All right. And for those in the chat, it looks like we have a lively chat. If you do have a question or something that you really want us to see, then if you wouldn't mind leaving a super chat or something, that way it pops up. Otherwise, we're just kind of going to do our thing and check in on the chat from time to time, but I won't be necessarily concerned with responding to the chat because I think there's enough here that we want to talk about as we go through the discussion.
Yeah. But by the way, if you for any $1,000 YouTube chat, you'll get a plenary indulgence. Just saying that, you know.
What is that, Robert?
Well, an indulgence is something that's issued by the keys of jurisdiction, according to Rome. And if you're in a state of grace, it means your temporal punishments will be taken removed from you. And if it's a plenary indulgence, all of that will be removed for you, so you won't have to go through purgatory. There's more to it, but that's the TLDR.
You can buy your way out of some extra steps.
All right, so we have our first clip. This is right around the 4-minute mark, and we'll go for about a minute. I do want to, most of these clips are only maybe a minute long. So if we can, we'll just go through each clip, and I'll stop at the end of the timestamp, and then we'll chat. That way we're not constantly stopping in the middle of it, if that's all right with you guys.
Yeah.
Sure.
Cool. So this is 4-minute mark.
There's not a catechism.
Yeah.
So you can say, here are some official Mormon sources. You can even say, here are things that your presidents in the past have said, and they're regarded as prophets.
Right.
And we expect, as non-Mormons, that that's going to carry the same weight as if you said, you know, Isaiah says such and such. Okay, it doesn't matter that Isaiah is not alive anymore. He's inspired by God. He's got revelation. So obviously we carry that with the weight that we would carry it if we were alive in Jesus's day and hearing, you know, St. Peter talk, or, you know, those things, whether they're alive or dead, it doesn't matter. But because of their vision of ongoing revelation, when you cite to even like past presidents, even though they were regarded as prophets,
just
they
real
don't
quick.
seem to carry the same weight as the living
I don't think
I don't understand this argument. It gets marched out all the time. So effectively, Moses's pronouncements to Israel carry the same weight as Peter. Is that what he's arguing? I mean, is that
that's what I got from that?
I don't understand. Like, he even cited Isaiah. So I guess every prophet of the Hebrew scriptures has the same authority and weight as Peter and Paul and now we have the problems that happened in Galatia, right? Yeah. So where people are arguing that, yeah, I don't understand this argument. They make it all the time, and I don't think that they even articulate what they're talking about very carefully.
Yeah. Michael's here in the chat. How you doing, Michael?
Hey, sorry I'm late.
No worries. Were you able to catch a little bit of that clip?
A little bit, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, any thoughts there, Michael or Robert?
Oh, Robert's on mute, it looks like.
Oh,
Robert, you're muted.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, sorry. I was Michael, if you wanted to go first, but I'll go first. First of all, like the idea, like say we don't have a catechism. Do any of you gents actually know when the first of only two universal catechisms were ever issued by the Roman Church?
Is it
1860?
1566
Yeah.
with the
I was gonna say-
1566.
Catechism of Trent. So,
Yeah, I was gonna say.
if not having a catechism, like a universal catechism, not a local
Mhm.
catechism, is an issue, Rome has been in the run for like 1500 plus years. Because there's only been two universal catechisms, the Roman Catechism, aka Catechism of the Council of Trent, 1566, and the Universal Catechism that was issued by JP II in 1992.
Yeah.
But here's the thing, we actually do have authoritative sources, such as the Doctrine and Covenants. If you read section 107 of the Doctrine and Covenants, when the First Presidency and Quorum of the 12 are in unanimity about a topic, that's as good as gold. So like there are various First Presidency / Quorum of the 12 statements that have been issued over the years. And Joe, I don't know if like Joe is just being deceptive or he just doesn't get it, but yes, we do believe our leaders can be the recipients of God-breathed theopneustos revelation, but that does not mean everything they say, even on doctrinal matters, is ipso facto God-breathed or binding. There are certain parameters upon which it is binding. And for those who want more, I was the primary researcher of the B.H. Roberts Mormon Or project on prophetic fallibility. I was about to say papal infallibility, but prophetic fallibility. So went through all the sources. So if you want like all the raw data, go into research. I also helped write some of the article as well. So that would be good TLD or. But we do believe like our leaders can be inspired. But like even Joe would admit, biblical prophets, including the apostles, were not always inspired by God in their moral and doctrinal teachings. For instance, an obvious example, Galatians, where Peter is condemned to his face by Paul. Now, some erroneously think that's a problem for papal infallibility. It's not, but it does show that Peter, at least in terms of his teachings or his external actions, was not inspired by God. And even Paul himself in Galatians 1 warns even a true apostle could actually preach a false gospel, even if we or an angel from heaven preach unto you a gospel that's anathema, basically. So it's that kind of special revelation is it's extraordinary, even during times of public revelation, and I know, like, say, the papacy is not, like, say, one-to-one equivalent, but, like, even Joe would say a pope, he can speak ex cathedra, when certain criteria are met, and there's, like, ordinary universal magisterium where you have to assent to it, in special cases. But that does not mean, like, Pope Francis or, like, now Leo XIV says something on theology that's ipso facto binding. And if you bring that up, like, in a dispute, it's not a cop-out for the Roman Catholic to say, well, that's not authoritative, Again, just as there's, like, various theological notes, if you will, in the Roman system, we actually have the very same thing as well. It can be still authoritative, it can be still respectful, or you should respect it and privilege it, but it doesn't mean it's inspired. So I could say more, but like, these are the same kind of tropes where Catholics and others think in very black and white terms, but for them, they expect us to know like the nuances of their position, and rightfully so, but they don't do the same for us. They always think like it's either or, but ignoring like the fact that there's gradients as well. So
Well, that's where what I like to say sometimes is, and this may not be 100% true all the time, but Catholics argue against LDS like we're Protestants. Protestants argue against LDS like we're atheists. Neither of them really get us. They can't hit the bullseye. They don't know what they're arguing against. And that creates a lot of these miscommunication issues. One thing they do say that they're kind of right on is when we say certain words, we might mean them differently, such as, for example, salvation and exaltation and things like that, right? Like, or theosis versus exaltation and stuff. And so there's kind of that sometimes comes into play to be charitable on that side of the take. But on the other side, if Joe's going around saying he's an expert in Mormonism, he needs to really actually know what he's saying. And it's garbage also that if he's going to say he's some kind of a scholar of the scriptures in some sense. I don't know if he actually claims to be a biblical scholar or just a Catholic scholar, but one of the things I also point out, and this is a common one, but Joe needs to answer for it. Christ said of marriage when asked that Moses allowed for a writ of divorce, but it was not always so, right? So why was
Right.
Moses authorized to make a change? And why is Jesus coming back and saying that we're going to have to get back to a time where that's not going to be the change? it effectively, right? And in teaching that, and so that's just an example where there's a difference of opinion over time across authorized servants of the Lord and the Lord himself on an issue. And it shows that Moses was duly authorized. He got to make that change. Whether it was inspired or not, I actually am not 100% sure, but it was allowed, and it was allowed for a very long time.
Yeah. Robert, you have
By the way,
something?
just two things. One, Alan Hansen. So hi to everyone. Is in the chat saying it's so far into their way of thinking, which is understandable, but they make no effort to understand or nuances, and I think he's correct. But just on Michael's thing about say the Deuteronomy, the permission of divorce, and Christ's teachings, that's a huge problem for say the Roman Catholic side, because Roman Catholics are bound to believe in absolute divine simplicity. The Fourth Lateran Council in 1215 with Peter Lombard's definition of simplicity, which is ADS, or absolute divine simplicity, and Aquinas accepted it. Basically, God has no parts at all, so he's attributes of say his intelligence is the same thing as his ability to create and so forth, so his moral teachings are equal to one-to-one his character. So he, in the Old Testament times, according to ADS, is allowing for or permitting say polygamy and divorce and remarriage, practices which according to Rome, especially in the New Covenant era, are abhorrent. So by his nature, he's actually issuing decrees or allowances from his nature of these abhorrent or inexcusable practices today. So it's a conundrum for them, especially with their understanding, say, absolute divine simplicity. No, I know that's kind of a
and just
difficult issue, but
yeah, and just on that note, that's the problem is that they were saying that they don't want to actually represent Latter-day Saint theology, and as Robert was saying, the nuances of Latter-day Saint theology. See, that what you just said is what I would expect somebody who is trying to fairly represent, and they would say, look, for Catholics, we would have these issues. Latter-day Saints have these problems. They have these issues. They have these ways of resolving it. At least then it looks like I'm actually a legitimate person, whereas this doesn't look like an analysis. This just looks like a critique of straw men. And so the argument is that what are they attacking? Well, they're not actually addressing Latter-day Saint theology or claims or nuance or complexity. What they're doing is they're addressing the same crap we always see when people produce this kind of stuff, where they just Google stuff and they want to misrepresent it, and there's no attempt to ever clarify any of the nuance or the complexity or the sophistication that comes with it. I would, if I was gonna fairly and balanced represent Latter-day Saints, I would say, they have modern revelation. So they have the Book of Mormon, which is another witness, etc. They have the Doctrine and Covenants, which is canonized, accepted, authoritative revelations. And they also have Section 107 that outlines the way the Quorum of the 12 have to work in unanimity, etc. And then say, okay, and that's how it is. But again, if you do that, people might say, oh, this makes sense. So effectively what this amounts to is just a plea to incredulity. Look at how ridiculous it is that they don't have a catechism to outline specifically. Why didn't they just canonize Mormon doctrine? If they had just canonized Mormon doctrine, we wouldn't have this critique. And that's what I don't get why they have to do this, and yet people still think that they have credibility.
Yeah. Sam,
how am I sounding?
It's a little muffled, but I can hear you.
Yeah, sorry, there's a bunch of road noise, but hopefully
it sounds echoey, Sam.
Shoot, I'm sorry.
It's okay.
So, Travis, Pirate Talk.
Dude,
thing I picked up from Joe
cutting out bad, Sam.
Yeah, Sam, it's cutting out pretty bad.
I'll try again in a second.
All right.
Sorry, man.
Sam is out on location somewhere on his phone.
Sorry,
so he will check in when he can. Hopefully we'll be able to hear from him better as we get further into the stream. But why don't we move ahead and go to the next timestamp? So let's see.
Is this basically how this is? Again, I haven't watched all of it.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah. It one claim to another claim to another claim.
Yeah, so we're going to go ahead We're going to go ahead to just about the 6-minute mark. I'll start a couple seconds ahead.
The outside things where you would expect them to be much more harmonious than they are.
Quick clarifying question: do they believe in biblical inerrancy?
No. So Joseph Smith articulated that the Bible was, divinely inspired as it was originally written.
Yeah.
But that leaves open the idea, as you get in Islam as well, that, maybe the manuscripts were corrupted.
So it would seem to me that if you're dealing with a religion who doesn't believe that their scriptures are inerrant or their prophets are infallible, that there's probably going to end up being a lot of flex in the joints.
Yes, that's a great way of describing it. And a lot of that's not what we talk about right now.
Yeah.
So you can find things that were very clearly taught with what seems to be the highest level of authority. And we'll return to that in a minute.
Okay.
Where now it's just they've moved on and they reject it as not even being true. The most famous example of this, and we can get into kind of the nuances of the...
I'll pause it here. That was the timestamp.
Let me finish the nuances. Let him finish the statement before you stop it.
Level of authority at which it was taught and everything is what's called the Adam God doctrine. And in the Adam God doctrine, Brigham Young...
Okay, I just wanted to hear which doctrine was the quintessential example that he was going to cite.
Yeah. Before Joe kind of goes into a topic that I'm actually an expert in, I do have a few comments about I
was just going to say, I'm glad Robert's here. Our resident expert on Adam God.
I can tell he's itching. I see flames rising now.
Oh no, I'm already itching to do this. First of all, Joe, say what you will about him. He's a believing Roman Catholic, and official Catholic theology is that the biblical texts, at least the autographs, are inerrant.
Wait, Robert, can I say what I want about him right now, or do you want me to tell you later?
You can tell me later.
Maybe I'll say
many will be shocked by that because, most New Testament scholars who are Roman Catholic tend to be left-leaning. Raymond Brown is an obvious example. He died in 1998, but he was very influential. But say the Council Trent Session 4 from 1546 taught that the Synod, that is Trent, following the examples of the Orthodox Fathers, receives and hold in veneration with equal affectionate piety and reverence all the books, both the Old and of the New Testament, since one God is the author of both, and also the traditions themselves, those that appertain both to faith and to morals, as having been dictated either by Christ's own word of mouth or by the Holy Spirit, and preserved in the Catholic Church by a continuous succession. Inerrancy of the autographs is actually a Catholic doctrine. Vatican I reiterated it, as did Leo XIII, not to be confused with the current Leo, but Leo XIII, in Providissimus Deus, 1893, and another would be Pius XII, the encyclical letter Divino Afflante Spiritu, which is well known to those who've studied theology, because this is where Pius XII allowed Catholics to engage in higher critical methodology, as long as they did not imbibe the a priori atheism or naturalism that infected Protestantism. And as a narrator would say, spoiler, unfortunately they did. But inerrancy is actually a Roman Catholic doctrine, at least for the autographs. And I just kind of mention this, not to debate Joe, but some LDS would be surprised by that because it's not really discussed a lot in ORC circles. But if you want a good book, I read this years ago, John F. McCarthy, Catholic Biblical Scholarship for the Third Millennium, which was published by Lotro Publications in 2017, a conservative venue. So, I just got to mention this, no, Joe is correct, inerrancy for the autographs is a Catholic teaching since Trent and even beforehand. However, first of all, guilt by association by trying to parallel us with Muslims. That's a really common tactic, and it's a cheap tactic. Because I could say the papists, with their traditions like the Ishnat chain, amongst Muslims, and I could engage in that kind of parallelism as well, but it's nonsense. Here's the thing. There are certain teachings, and perhaps we can discuss some of them later, that Rome clearly taught that is now not the case. For instance, 2 examples. One, delayed ensoulment for everyone except Christ. That is, soul did not enter at conception, it entered sometime afterwards. That was a constant teaching with very few detractors, all throughout, even until the turn of the 20th century. You have the Roman pontifical from the 17th century saying that if a stillborn child doesn't exactly look human and they're called a monster, you should not baptize them. But if they seem human, you should conditionally baptize. If you're human, I baptize you. Which would mean But now, the late installment is not taught. It's now the common teaching in the Catholic Church that at conception, everyone's soul enters into their body, if you will. It wasn't just an exception for Christ, and that is a theological as well as a moral issue, when it comes to, say, the fate of unbaptized infants, and so on and so forth. Another would be what the Catholic Church teaches about there being true martyrs and true believers outside the bosom of the Catholic Church. The Council of Florence in Cantante Domino states that the Catholic Church, quote, firmly believes, professes, and proclaims that those not living within the Catholic Church, not only pagans, but also Jews and heretics and schismatics, cannot become participants in eternal life, but will depart into everlasting fire, which was prepared for the devil and his angels, unless before the end of life the same have been added to the flock, that is, the Catholic Church, and that the unity of the ecclesiastical body is so strong that only those remaining in it are the sacraments of the church of benefit for salvation. So even the Eastern Orthodox, who would have a very similar theology in many respects as Rome at this time, their sacraments are null and void. Not that they don't have any grace, but, it's not efficacious, if you're familiar with the material formal reception of the grace of a sacrament. And what does Vatican II teach? Us Christians and Muslims venerate, not clearly claim to venerate, but we actually venerate and adore the same God. The Jews, they still have a special relationship of sorts with God, and, Eastern Orthodox theologians and saints who condemn, say, the Filioque clause as Arian and satanic, such as Gregory of Palamas and Photius. Eastern Rite Catholics are allowed to venerate them, and that's part of the universal cultus, which is generally seen as protected by the indefectibility of the church, a la secondary objects of infallibility. If anyone wants me to unpack those ideas, let me know. Former Catholic here, by the way. But again, Joe is engaged in standards that, if you were to apply it to Roman Catholicism, even allowing for, say, the differences, his Romanism would not actually stand up to scrutiny. So this is one of the more 19s. He engages in standards he knows his Roman Catholic theology and history would never withstand scrutiny too, if applied equally, equal weights and measurements.
Yeah. Which begs the question. That's the issue, is that I wonder what audience he's speaking to, or how he is understanding a Catholic audience. So Catholics watching this, if they do actually understand their own dogma, wouldn't they know the issues that Robert just raised? And if so, wouldn't they see the hypocrisy in critiquing Latter-day Saint positions when Rome doesn't stand up to the same standards? I wonder that. I often wonder what they actually think of their own adherents to make these kinds of arguments. Who's your audience, right? Are you just talking to Protestants who don't know Catholic theology and hoping that they won't see the inconsistencies and the arguments between what you're claiming and how they hold up against Rome when you take the same standards? And I always wonder what they're thinking in that respect, with respect to their own people.
Well, and Joe did say, I don't know if it's in one of the clips that we have timestamped, but Joe did say at one point that Latter-day Saints generally, the lay membership, are not philosophically minded as Catholics are or other Christians are, and so we're just dumb. Don't think we're dumb, basically.
We're just dumb. What do we know?
Oh, go ahead. You're right.
I'm sorry. I've lived in, say, predominantly Roman Catholic countries, mainly Ireland, but sometimes Poland as well, for the majority of my life. That is, yes, Catholics imbibe Thomism. So it's not simply philosophy, it's a certain type of philosophy. So at least for, say, Thomism is the official Catholic theology, at least for the Western Rite Catholics, before Tarek Lacour comes in and tries to correct me on this. Shout out to our favorite apostate, hellbound Eastern Rite Catholic, by the way. But joking aside, what kind of planet, what if you ever watch Fraser, as I have, it's what color is the sky in your world, Joe? Because it is true, there are certain Catholics who are very well philosophically trained, but they're not like the normie Catholics. Like most normie Catholics, at least here in Ireland and Poland, and from my experience in the United States as well, in the places I've been there as well, not just Utah, but a few other places as well, they're just run-of-the-mill people who could not tell you, say, what a formal or instrumental cause is, and all, or what's the difference between divine and absolute divine simplicity, or what's Lombard's definition and stuff like that. So, yes, it's true. Rome privileges philosophy, i.e., Thomism, and Aristotelianism, but we also have like very good philosophers as well, like the late David Paulson, Blake Oster, Joseph Lowell, and others. So
Yeah, and he does clarify in his in that little bit that Latter-day Saints just simply don't have the time under their belts to develop a strong philosophical tradition. And I understand that point. And certainly the church has been around for 200 years as opposed to, 1700 years or 1800 years or whatever. So yes, in terms of just sheer amount of time, certainly we don't have as long of a philosophical tradition. But to your point, Robert, I find that most people in general across the board, regardless of their religious tradition, are not your philosophically minded, theologically minded people who study this stuff the way that like you would. Uh, they're just run of the mill people. They have jobs, they have families, they have other things going on in their life, and they have some strong convictions of their relationship with Christ or whatever that looks like, and they move on with their life. And so I just thought that was kind of a weird thing for him to bring up.
Well, yeah, and on that note, Latter-day Saint theology is different in the sense that while we can apply philosophical frameworks, which of course people like Blake Ostler do, in great detail in his multi-volume series, the biggest issue is that Latter-day Saints rely on a revealed religion. So we look at the biblical text and we say, if you have to have a comprehensive understanding of Greek or Aristotelian or Thomist philosophy in order to understand the biblical texts, then who did? Who in the first century, especially amongst Israelites who are receiving these teachings from Jesus and the apostles amongst Israel, and then after that with Paul, as he goes out on his missionary labors amongst peasants, who among them is educated in these ideas? And so Latter-day Saints likewise, with respect to the nature of God, I mean, they have a philosophical framework that they apply in order to extrapolate a triune God from the biblical text by using certain passages and then asking themselves deep questions that philosophy answers. In fact, when you talk to Orthodox people, which I've done a lot of recently on TikTok and other platforms, they're like, well, the apostles would have had to have had these frameworks. John 1:1, for example, can't even be understood outside of a Greek philosophical framework and things like that. And yet for Latter-day Saints, we look at the very pragmatic and practical application of revelation, where Joseph Smith goes into the sacred grove, kneels down, asks God a question, a very clear question, receives a specific and direct answer, and in addition to that specific and direct answer, receives this grand revelation which basically clarifies centuries of confusion about the specific nature of the Father and the Son, what their appearance is like, what their physical characteristics are like, whether they're embodied, whether they look like human beings, etc., all in one grand revelation that he simply says, look, I beheld the Father and the Son. One of them spake unto me, calling me by name, etc. So Latter-day Saints don't typically engage from a theological position in this deep philosophical framework that we then go back and analyze the biblical text through. Again, it's just a framework that they're using, and I don't think they're understanding it that way.
Yeah, I think like again, this is not like say interacting with Joe per se, but like trying to like educate an LDS audience to some Roman issues as well. Natural theology has been dogmatized by the Catholic Church, so they do believe like you can actually come to like a saving knowledge of God, not simply like a general knowledge of God through like say natural theology or nature. It may not always happen, but like it can happen, and so that's why like that kind of shows like the privileged position of philosophy in the Roman system. And for those who want the receipts, it's Vatican I De Filius that elevated it to a position of a dogma. Not that it wasn't believed before then, but that's when it was like scientifically defined as a dogma. So again,
which
like
makes me
go ahead, Michael.
I kind of have a question on that, and I'm sorry to detour a little bit, but I think it's applicable. Is that natural understanding why is someone who's an atheist can use the Trinitarian formula in a baptism and it's valid because they have a natural understanding? It wasn't given as a gift
No, that's sacramental. That's sacramental intention, and for baptism, sacramental intention is very loose. I won't go into. I don't think like sacramentology comes here, but basically, like for a baptism, as long as the minister, that is the person who does it, intends to do what the Catholic Church intends for a baptism, even if they're not cognizant of a lot of it, that suffices for sacramental intention for baptism.
That's how I understood
it gets more complex when it comes to, say, ordination, especially if you're familiar with Apostolicae Curiae of 1896 and the Anglican order since the time of Prince Edward. But I don't think anyone wants me to discuss sacramental theology, but I hopefully will be discussing sacramental theology with Jen Roach in the near future. So.
And you can talk about the Apostolic Curiae and how that affects her ordination. No, but just to that note, I mean, that's the thing, is that it's intention. And so anyway, the way it's been described to me is Latter-day Saint baptisms are accepted because our intention with respect to baptizing under the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, we have a different framework that is not a triune God. When we're baptizing, we're thinking Father, Son, Holy Spirit as three physically and corporeally distinct beings rather than the ontological Trinity. So if somebody doesn't understand the Trinitarian framework and baptizes in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, and is intending to do that in the name of, quote, God, but doesn't have an understanding, well, yeah, they'll accept that baptism, which is why they accept Protestant and other baptisms. So, I mean, it makes sense. I mean, in the sense that you're giving leeway, but where I think it's hypocritical is you're saying, oh, well, you guys don't understand God the same way we do, and specifically have an understanding of God that's different, so we don't accept your baptisms, which is fine with me. I don't care. We don't accept theirs either.
Yep, exactly. We don't accept theirs. Ours is, but our reasoning is totally different. It's duly appointed authority, right?
Yeah, so. we don't know if you have authority. So just like Paul with the Ephesians in Acts 19, you have to rebaptize you.
and that's a difference. Unlike, say, some of the other sacraments, you don't need like any priestly or episcopal ordination to effect a baptism. You do for the other sacraments, but not for baptism in Catholic theology.
Yeah. Speaking for Sam, who's having audio issues but is still listening, he left a chat for us here, and his point for this last clip that we watched is that Joe sets a maximal standard and then scoffs at our sufficient standard.
Right. And that's a good point. That's an excellent point.
Yeah. So I did want to mention that before we move on to the next clip. So we're going to jump ahead a little bit to let's see. We're going to go to 21 minutes in, and we'll let it go for just over a minute. Let's see if I can get it. All right. We'll start right here.
How many gods would Jacob Hansen say there are?
I don't mean
gods that we're bound to worship.
That's
I mean just
stupid.
Jacob was asked almost this direct question, because the question he was asked was whether God the Father had a God that he worshipped.
What did he say?
We don't know.
He said we don't know?
Yeah.
But I thought that was
because it doesn't matter.
Mormon teaching that he did.
So it was.
It was.
It was.
There's maybe a little flex in the joints.
Okay, I wasn't trying to be smart. I don't know.
This is a great question. So there's two things. One, how many gods are there? Two, what do we mean by gods? And this is going to get to the heart of what we mean in saying, philosophically, Mormonism is a species of atheism.
Okay.
Because imagine someone who says, I don't believe there's a God who created everything, but I do believe there's a spiritual realm of ghosts and demons and angels. And if you want to call some of those angels and demons gods, go nuts.
Yep, I get it.
But they didn't create the universe.
Right.
That is very similar, actually, to where a Mormon ends up.
Right, so philosophically, they don't believe in a creator of all creation.
Yeah, exactly. They reject the idea of creation from nothing. They believe in creation from pre-existing matter. And if you ask where that pre-existing matter comes from, you get the same kind of shrug of the shoulders.
Okay.
I'm going to pause here for a minute. Yeah. Well, I have another clip right after this that goes leans more directly into modes of creation, creatio ex nihilo, and so forth. And so I want to save that for the next clip. But just on this idea of how many gods there are, do we know? Like, this is one of the most ridiculous questions.
I hate this question.
It's a question. If you've served a mission, you've heard this question. I certainly did a number of times. The answer for anybody listening who is not a Latter-day Saint and happens upon this live stream is we don't know and we don't care. It bears no relevance to salvation, exaltation. It bears no relevance to Christ's atonement.
I would read Isaiah 40 through 48, place it in its appropriate context, and say, I'm going to preach to you the same thing all the prophets of Israel would say. Stay faithful to the God of Israel. Stop looking for other gods. And anybody who proposes that question is effectively the same kind of a prophet that's being denounced in Deuteronomy 13. Somebody who's coming in the name of another god and trying to get you to So just by suggesting there could be other gods, you are enticing the person away from the worship of the true and living God, which is exactly what Jesus. So what I say is, I don't know. I worship the God of Jesus. That's who I submit to.
Yeah.
Also, and I know, Jacob, you actually had a debate on this like maybe a year or so against the ex-LDS fellow. But like we do know, like the Bible itself, affirms the ontological existence of gods, not simply angels. Like the textual variant at Qumran of Deuteronomy 32, 7, 9, and 43. Psalm 82 only makes sense if the Elohim are actually members of a divine council or gods. They can't be human judges because they're meant to die Adam, like as Adam. And the idea, like, say they're human judges has been rubbish for like 90 years since Cyrus Gordon's article on Elohim in Vetus Testamentum, I believe. And there's a host of other things as well, like, a Roman Catholic scholar, Mark S. Smith, The Origins of Biblical Monotheism, has a very good overview. Our mutual friend Blake Oster, Volume 3 of Exploring Mormon Thought, goes into like very good detail about non-LDS scholarship on this point and the plurality of gods, if you will. Our answer is basically what Joseph Smith gave at the Sermon in the Grove, aka Discourse on the Plurality of Gods, where he basically quoted Paul, who affirmed the ontological existence of other lords and other gods, but said, to us, there's one God, the Father, and one Lord Jesus Christ. And that's actually the same answer Christ gives in John 17:3. For him, the one true God is not the being, if you will, of Thomistic philosophy or what have you, that has no passions or parts in his constitutive being. No, it's the person of the Father. And in fact, does anyone know who Eleanor Stump is?
Nope.
Well, Eleanor Stump is a faithful Roman Catholic. But in one of her books, she basically struggles with the idea, like, say, how can Thomism be true if, in light of the biblical data, for instance, she points to the book of Jonah. Another example would be like God, the conditional prophecy in Micah 3:12 as well, changing his mind and being referred to as a someone as opposed to a being and so forth. The biblical God is actually presented as being this personal being. He can be moved, a la Exodus 32 and 33. He can actually change his mind or change his prophecies and commands based on the then for future free will actions of man, a la Jeremiah 18, 7-10. But like the Thomist reads these texts, and it's not like, say, Roman Catholics are stupid. Like, they're very smart people. I know loads of very smart Catholics, like either normies or priests, and so forth. But they basically say, well, this is anthropomorphizing. They have to downplay the biblical data, where just on the purely exegetical, grammatical, historical context, it doesn't actually support Thomism at all.
Yeah, and this so this happens quite frequently in modern Christian discussion. Looking at the biblical text and seeing passages where God is anthropomorphized, he is anthropomorphic. It seems to be that the gods, plural, are anthropomorphic. They interact with humans. In fact, they look like humans. There's even discussion in certain passages as to whether or not they are human, because the people who are interacting with them can't tell the difference if they're human or not. There's a number of instances throughout the biblical texts that over time get squished down and flattened into, well, different kinds of beings. And so you have Yahweh is supreme. He is the only one who is rightfully called God. and all other gods, spiritual beings, divine beings get squished down to like angelic beings, as if that's a separate ontological category. And this happens over time, and it certainly happens by the time you get to the Greek writers of the Old Testament texts, who are writing the Septuagint and so forth into first century. And so you have this tradition of divine beings who would just kind of be all in the same ontological class, become differentiated, and they all get squished down to a lesser status in an effort to distinguish Yahweh from the rest of the divine beings. Robert, you had something you wanted to add?
Yeah, I actually got the quote from Eleanor Stump. By the way, it's the Aquinas lecture from 2016, The God of the Bible and the God of the Philosophers. And by the way, Eleanor Stump is like a really good modern Thomist on, say, the problem of evil and the atonement and other issues. So if you want, like, say, a very good modern Thomistic perspective on those, do check out Stump. For instance, commenting on Jonah, the story of Jonah. In this story, the God of the Hebrew Bible is so present to human beings that they know God and relate to him in highly personal ways. For his part, God converses with people, responds to their needs and prayers, apparently changes his mind about what he has told him, issues prophecies about them that he seems to decide not to fulfill, and in general engages with individual human persons in close and personal ways. And also commenting on Christ speaking to the fig tree in Mark 11:14, let no one eat fruit of you, she writes. And now the problem is evident. How could being say you to anything? And who could use second personal address in any location towards God if God is being alone? And in general, in the biblical stories, there is a readily discernible image of God in human beings, and conversely a readily discernible divine original in God for the image of God in human beings. By contrast, there seems to be so little in common between God and human beings on the characterization of the God of classical theism, i.e. Thomism, as I have described it here, that it's hard to imagine why anyone would suppose that human beings are made in the image of such a God. Now, Stump is a faithful Catholic, she is a Thomist, but you have to give her credit, she does actually struggle here with the biblical texts, taken at a purely historical, grammatical perspective, as well as being taken prima facie as well, with the dogma of ADS, absolute divine simplicity. So
I find that you...
But you would not know any of this by going through Joe's thing. And I'm not saying Catholics struggle when it comes to certain issues, that's game over for Rome. No, everyone has difficult texts and issues they have to get over as well. That's not just a problem for Roman Catholicism, that's an issue for us and everyone. It's just you would not know that, because I don't believe Joe is an honest actor. I don't know about you guys, but that's just. So, and by the way, when it comes to say the kinfold discourse in Jacob, again, I wonder if Joe is actually familiar with, say, the different accounts of the kinfold discourse, and how at that important junction where the traditionally received text, we have imagined God to be God from all eternity, I will refute it. It's actually the eternality of God being God is affirmed. Joseph basically says these are incomprehensible truths assembled with the idea of first importance of the gospel, or truth is a touchstone if he does not refute that. And this has been discussed for decades now. Van Hale and others have had discussions about the textual variations in the kinfold discourse. And although I don't always agree with Jacob, I do know Jacob's perspective, because we've actually talked to Jacob Hansen, not simply Jacob Ryder here. And also Blake, this interpretation is not unique to Blake Oster. You actually even have it with William Wines Phelps a few years after Joseph Smith's death in the Times and Seasons. And I've documented this on the Adam God Research Project. So it's not unique to Blake Oster, but Blake has discussed this quite a bit since his book, where he has an entire chapter on it, and that was from 2006. Chapter 12, God Eternal Father, in Volume 2 of the Exploring Mormon Thought series. So I just thought I'd mention that as well.
Extra credit for not just saying W.W. Phelps, but giving the whole name. I mean, good job. I just wanted to quickly add, just to bring it back a little bit, because we're going to talk to KFD, I think, next, right? Or soon, if this is coming up.
It might be in a couple clips.
Yeah. But to bring it back, what maybe Joe doesn't get, or what he's trying to paint a picture of, at least, even if he says he gets it, is that, or what is being perhaps the hidden ball within the trick being done here, right? Is the idea that if we believe there are multiple gods, then we must be, and this is, where Travis was going, but then it must mean that we are okay worshiping multiple gods, or that we do worship multiple gods, or people have leeway to do so. There's a pantheon, and it's all chaotic. And
Well, that's why
what my main answer.
well, that's why I always push back whenever anybody characterizes, and this is why where Latter-day Saints need to be precise in our language, that the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit are, well, they're three different gods. That kind of language of they're different gods is something we need to be very careful that we don't allow people to get away with saying things like that without afterwards clarifying, what do you mean by different? The Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit are not different gods. They are the same. And so this idea of them being different is like, are you saying that they're like, Poseidon and Hades and right? Like those are different gods, right? The Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit are not different in that way. So, and this is where they try to accuse us of polytheism, and it's just again, it's a straw man, and again, it's usually a plea to incredulity.
Oh, for sure. And so my answer really is like in our sacramental, our ordinantal worship, whatever you want to call it, we say the Most High God. That is the exact phrase from the temple, right? And that is the height of our worship. As Joe says, he understands the temple to be the height of our worship. And if in the temple we say Most High God in reference to the God we worship, he doesn't get to try to do this hide-a-ball game. Oh, they have multiple gods and a pantheon and pluralism and it's polytheism. No, that's not what we say. And if you're going to be an honest expert on Mormonism, you need to know that. And I like, yeah.
Yeah, I like what Elder Holland. I love Elder Holland's talk, and if you want a good framework for Latter-day Saint theology on the nature of God and its contrast with the triune nature of God is the only true God and Jesus Christ whom he sent is an excellent talk, and I hope everybody has read it. But when he says it, he quotes the first article of faith, and then he goes on and he says, "We believe these three divine persons constituting a single Godhead are united in purpose, in manner, in testimony, and mission. We believe them to be filled with the same godly sense of mercy and justice and love and grace, patience, forgiveness, and redemption. I think it is accurate to say we believe they are one in every significant and eternal aspect imaginable, except believing them to be three persons combined in one substance. A Trinitarian notion never set forth in the scriptures because it is not true." And then he cites the Harper's Bible Dictionary that says that the formal doctrine is not found in the text. But I mean, if you want to have clarity, the apostles teach with clarity, publicly, openly, and with regularity, and in unanimity on these issues. And so, it's all there if you really want to know Latter-day Saint theology.
Yeah, especially Elder Holland with like the apologetic types. Like he's probably given more of the apologetic type conference addresses than any others.
And I actually had somebody push back. I quoted a conference talk, and I can't remember which one of the apostles said it. And he says, "Yeah, but that's just the opinion of that apostle." And I said, "Not when it's delivered at general conference." And I'll tell you why. And I said, they're speaking in unanimity when they're speaking in general conference. And the reason is that the other brethren are sitting behind them on the stand, right? Like this isn't like, I'm just going to one-off ramble. So the idea, for example, when President Nelson stated that we need to, and again, for clarity, we need to correctly state the name of the church and stop calling the church the Mormon Church. He's not saying you can't call yourselves Mormons or call people Mormons. What did you just do? It's too small. I'm too blind, Robert.
Oh, what's the book, Robert?
No. Just speaking about like worship, worshiping other gods, I want you to fill in the blank for the following, and also tell me if you think this is worship.
Right.
You must obtain for me the forgiveness of my sins, perseverance until death, and deliverance from purgatory. It is through you that all who are saved obtain their salvation, and so you, blank, it is you who must save me.
Queen of
Mary.
Yeah.
Alphonsus Liguri.
Yeah, I think I've seen
but it's okay. It's only hyperdulium dudes.
Yeah, so
only hyperdulium. Yeah.
Yeah, so but yeah, I just think that so in that context, President Nelson gave a similar talk like in 91, and then it was reiterated by President Hinckley in the very next conference, who referred to it. And again, the distinction is President Nelson is referring to the name of the church, and President Hinckley later on in the next conference is referring to it's okay, don't get butthurt when people call us Mormons.
Right.
Don't be offended by that. And he says, oh, well, Mormons mean more good. No, one of them is talking about what we should say about the name of the church, and the other one is talking about that. And this is the other issue, is that Latter-day Saints should pay more attention and actually call people out when they make these kinds of straw man arguments to try to make distinctions or differences or confusion that they try to sow. A lot of the confusion in Latter-day Saint theology doesn't come from inside the church and from the leaders. It comes from accusations and misunderstandings of what's being produced that come outside the church, like this presentation here.
Mm-hmm.
I do. So to your point, Travis, about the proper name of the church versus the membership of the church generally. So at the end of the interview, they do get on this for a little bit about the name of the church and why Matt. And I don't know if we'll play the clip, but it is towards the end of the interview. Matt wants to understand why the rebrand, so to speak. So
why do we insist on people calling us what we've called ourselves since 1838?
I will say part of that discussion, Joe is actually doing a halfway decent job of trying to represent the church as the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.
Okay, well,
and
at least
call
that's
its members LDS. He also did mention, and I'm glad Joe did. Joe also mentioned that we also have to be able to distinguish between the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, headquartered in Utah, etc., versus some smaller breakoff groups, whether it's Strangites or other groups who might also use the moniker Mormon.
There's still Strangites?
About 300.
Yeah, there's still a handful. So before we move on to the next clip, at the end of this clip we've just played, he starts to get into creatio ex nihilo. The next clip I have,
this is why I wish Blake was here.
Well, I'm going to do my best.
Blake has a lot to say on creatio ex nihilo. He's written.
I'm going to do my best to try and represent some of that in a rather condensed time frame. But I do have a couple things in the chat. And something from Sam I want to read. So Hayden Carroll is in the chat. He left a super chat for us. The constant Catholic double standard is wild. And then we do have another super chat from Blessing at Blessing 1532. Thank you guys for the super chats. Why worship and be faithful to the God of Israel? And Travis, Isaiah 40 through 48 is that answer. I am Yahweh, your savior, your redeemer. There's no one besides me who has saved you, who has redeemed you. That's the point of those Isaiah chapters, and that's the point of much of Deuteronomy. That's the point of much of that discussion or rhetoric that is being used throughout the Hebrew Bible. It is specifically because Yahweh redeemed their people, that they are allegiant to him. It becomes expanded through further revelation by future prophets and certainly into the New Testament era. And so salvation takes on a greater meaning, a greater focus in the daily devotion of the people. In ancient Israel, in ancient Near Eastern contexts, as the further back you go, the gods interact with their people and perform specific functions. They have jobs or duties or things that they do in the cosmos and interact with humanity as they fulfill those roles in the cosmos. But it's more immediate to the people's daily life, like I need rain so my crops will grow. Things of that nature. And so the further you go through history, to the time of the New Testament and onwards to a more fully developed Christian tradition, the idea of the gods being more about the eternal welfare of your soul becomes the predominant understanding of what salvation was always meant to be, rather than, say, 3000 BC in Mesopotamia and what they might have had in mind. Go ahead, Robert.
Yeah, I'll be brief. But just it's not just like Isaiah, like even the Shema, Shema Yisrael Adonai Elenehu Adonai Echad. That's about covenantal monotheism. Like, say, there's only one God in ontological existence. For instance, in a dissertation I read a while ago by Laurie Ann Robertson Barron, the Shema in John's Gospel against its background in Second Temple Judaism from Duke University in 2015, which was a very good dissertation. In the Deuteronomic context, Deuteronomy 6:4 is not a monotheistic statement that denies the existence of other gods. Rather, it is an acknowledgement that although there may be rival claimants for Israel's allegiance, Yahweh or Adonai is the king of Israel, unique, incomparable, the one and only. And also, while Deuteronomy 6:4-9 was a text that affirmed loyalty to Yahweh only, Jewish belief in God's uniqueness was also able to accommodate belief in intermediary beings, even during the Second Temple period as well. So it's ultra like the Old Testament. It's about the incomparability of Yahweh or Adonai, but not the denial of the ontological, that is the real existence of other beings who can truly be called gods, not simply angels. But it's all about like our covenantal allegiance and adherence to God in that context alone. And that's something that's continues on even in the New Testament, like again 1 Corinthians 8:4-6, where Paul not splits but expands the Shema to include the one Lord Jesus Christ. Contra Bacchum, it's not part of God's divine identity, which results in modalism if you're consistent. But no, it's about our covenantal unity now with the Father and the Son. And as Michael said, this is part of our sacramental theology as well. And
it's something that we can see if you read Third Nephi, you read the text beginning around chapter 8 on through to 11, you see this analysis that the voice that's speaking to the people, the one that's cutting them to their hearts, that they, hear audibly or they feel it or whatever it is that's happening with Christ's voice to the surviving Nephites, he's actually talking about, I am the covenant God of Israel, but now I have become the God of the earth as a consequence of my atonement, which was offered not just for Israel. I'm not just the savior of Israel as was identified by Isaiah. I am the savior of mankind. I saved Israel from Egyptian bondage. I am the savior of them from bondage. I am the God of Israel. But then he says, I am the God of Israel. I am the God of the whole earth. So as a consequence of his atonement and his super exaltation by the Father to sit in the Father's throne, he is now the God of the earth. And this idea, this transition of the God of Israel becoming the God of the earth is often not considered by Latter-day Saints in our theology. We just kind of think of, oh, okay, Jesus is talking to this group at this time, and then it's applying to everybody. It's the same mistake that a lot of Christians make when they read the biblical text by not placing them into the framework of Isaiah is not talking to the world, he's talking to Israel. Moses isn't talking to everybody, he's talking to Israel. And so you have to understand these frameworks. And Jesus, even during his mortal ministry, isolates his ministry to Israel and to the lost sheep of Israel, which is Israel. And then he calls his apostles and commissions them after his atonement to spread this gospel, because now he has not just saved Israel, but he saved the world, and that message needs to go out, because now he has been given dominion over all nations. And so it's just this transition of this great theology that's very clear, I think, in the biblical texts, but is crystal clear, I think, in the Book of Mormon. And this idea of the confusion that they have about Yahweh's and their Trinitarian philosophy about the Holy Spirit is Yahweh, and they don't even understand what Yahweh is or who he is or what he is. And this idea that Jesus is identifying that he has a Lord and a God, that he has a God, and that this God has appointed him to become the Savior of Israel, but also now the God of the earth, is, I think, very significant teachings that are very clear in Latter-day Saint theology.
Yeah, and I will point out too, because Robert brought out the Shema, I did a video on the Shema a few weeks ago, so it's going to be recent if you look down at my channel, my recent videos. And the whole Exodus narrative is framed around Yahweh's deliverance of Israel and its people from Egypt, and in Exodus 12:12 explicitly states that Yahweh holds judgment over the gods of Egypt. So to the point that Joe and Matt are making earlier about how many gods and whatever, all this nonsense, it doesn't matter. It's not explicated. Who cares? But the entire point of this question, why worship the God of Israel? Well, because he redeemed you from these other gods and holds judgment over them. Sam is in the chat, in our private chat here, and he says that he will try and log on in about an hour when he gets off work. But he did have one thing he wanted to say, so I'll be his spokesman once again. He says, classical Christian philosophy solves for God as the root of ultimate explanation. The restored gospel, however, affirms God as sufficient to realize our salvation from sin and death. God as ground of being or pure actuality goes beyond that mark. If all God wants to do is save us from sin and death, why exactly must he be the sole necessary being, uncreated creator, and so on?
And why must it be then that to be saved from sin and death means to be his creature, divided from him, wholly apart, not like him, and never able to progress?
Because of Thomism.
Yes.
Because of reason.
But this kind of shows like the absolute importance of the debate between creatio ex nihilo and ex materia. You said that you'll be discussing that, Jacob, so I won't go into that detail yet. But
yeah, that's our next clip.
Yeah, good.
Let's go to the next clip. Yeah, we're all rambling here.
Okay, so let's see. So we're going to skip ahead about the 34-minute mark.
How old is Joe Heschmeyer? Anybody know?
That's a good
He's
question.
40.
Okay. I was going to say he looks young.
Yeah, I think he was born in 85 because I know he was 27 when he left the seminary, and that was in 2012. So 40, 41.
Okay, we're going to start it here. It's somewhere around the 34-minute mark.
By God, but him being from another one. So that raises all these questions of where is God's planet, and is it in the cosmos? And particularly if God is material, how does that work? Is there, like, if we took a rocket ship far enough, could we find God's planet?
It almost seems
if we built a tower tall enough.
That's right.
Mormonism.
That's right. I think that is actually
so I
correct.
I don't know if
that
I'll go back and
almost
play this
seems
again.
and
See
is
if
it
you
in the cosmos, and particularly if God is material, how does that work? Is there, like, if we took a rocket ship far enough, could we find God's planet?
It almost seems like if the Big Bang Theory is true, it might disprove
That's right.
Mormonism.
That's right. I think that is actually correct. That if creation has a beginning, if time has a beginning, then some of these claims don't seem to work. And if their theory about how the Big Bang happens or any of this is just, well, it just happens on its own, then it becomes very clear that we're dealing with a species of atheism, a very colorful.
Okay, I'm going to pause it there. I wanted to.
I'm not understanding that. What is he talking about? Can somebody
He
explain to me
doesn't
what
seem
the
to
hell he just said?
It's
So-
gibberish.
So, okay, Robert, you might have to check me. In 1951, this is what I found. In 1951, the Pope, and I don't remember the name, he said that Catholics affirmed the Big Bang Theory because
Pius XII.
Huh?
That would be Pius XII.
Pius XII said it, yes. But then he walked it back like a year or two later after talking to the guy that came up with the theory, because the guy was like, whoa, you're taking it too far. But for a while there, the Catholic Church said, yeah, Big Bang Theory, truly science, like this is the true form of science and all that. And the way they formulated it, since my understanding is God being outside of time and space, what he did is he created the thing that became the explosive material of the Big Bang and caused it to do that. And that's how they're marrying it. And that's what that's what I was reading this week, because this was weird, man.
Yeah, if Joe is trying to do what like Copan and Craig did in the New Mormon Challenge back in 2002, trying to argue Big Bang cosmology is a problem for like LDS cosmology. The problem though is like before the Big Bang, in light of, say, recent scholarship, I think like the last 30, 40 years on this, like Ron Hellings and others have discussed this, there was a quantum vacuum before the Big Bang. And that's not nothing, that's necessity by creatio ex nihilo. Like when scientists and cosmologists speak of nothing, if you actually read the literature, they're not talking about like, say, ex nihilo creation. They're just talking about like a quantum vacuum, you know.
Vacuums, yeah.
So it's not, so if the Big Bang is true, that's not a problem for our cosmology. Now, I'm not a cosmologist. You know, I'm more like a language, history, theology guy, so I stay in my lane. But from my reading of the literature, and even like, say, Turk Lecor, I think he would agree with me because he's read up on this as well, and he's a Thomist. It doesn't actually support, like, say, ex nihilo creation. And also, like, the jab, I'm trying to be nice to Matt because he has done some good stuff, you know, even though I think his stuff on Mormonism is bad and he really should get someone informed on it. But at the same time, when it comes to say, well, you know, it's true, like in our theology, even spirit is material in some way. But here's the thing, Chalcedon, which is a binding ecumenical council for the Roman Catholic, at least when it comes to say its decrees and, you know, states that Christ will always retain his glorified human body. He will be the eternal high priest, you know. So that means he has some type of spatial temporal location in his person, you know. And of course, like Catholic theology versus ex-Nestorianism, like in the reference of Jesus, there's actually not two divine persons, but two divine natures, two divine wills. They don't mix a la Eutychianism, but there's still one single person. So that one person, who's the second member of the Godhead, the second member of the Trinity, will forever remain, at least with respect to his humanity, embodied, you know. So he has some type of spatial temporal existence, at least with respect to his humanity. So like, it's very easy to say like, oh, you know, Roman Catholic and mainstream Orthodox Christology has like an alien as a member of their Godhead, and you know, we could get a planet some way, like if we develop like warp speed a la Star Trek, you know, which I'm a fan of, you know, we'll eventually encounter them, you know. It's so easy to misrepresentation. But if Joe is trying to argue Big Bang cosmology at least refutes Latter-day Saint cosmology vis-a-vis the nature of creation, or he's trying to argue, like, say, big crunch or issues with respect to, say, embodiment, it kind of indicates like he hasn't read much on the scholarship in the last 50 years, except maybe like, say, what Copan and Craig have said, and what they wrote was dated when they wrote both the essays and the book on creatio ex nihilo. Blake Oster actually has a very good article on the inductive argument for creation out of nothing and its problems on the Fair LDS website in response to Copan and Craig. Blake has studied the issue much more than I have, so I'm just kind of trying to remain in my lane by giving general information. But on the big crunch issue, Blake, you know, we're all fans of Blake. He discusses the big crunch and issues vis-a-vis Latter-day Saint cosmology and theology in the first volume. I actually have excerpts of that on my blog, so if you were to type in big crunch or something to that effect, you'll see where Blake discusses why it's not necessarily a problem for it, because we believe God has a glorified, exalted body. It's what Paul would say in 1 Corinthians 15 for the resurrected body of Christ and the saints at the eschaton. It's a summa pneumaticon, that is a spiritual body, not a spirit only, but like it's full of the spirit, it's perfected, it can't be harmed. But how that works in our temporal physical existence, which we will retain in the resurrection as well, we don't really know. But like, we won't be affected by like big crunch or like any other issues as well, you know. And the same for our understanding of deity as well.
Well, and another thing with just scientifically speaking, you cannot destroy matter, you cannot destroy energy. Neither of the two are destroyable. They exist in some form. They might have apathy occur to them. They will change form based on energy heating up, electrons, protons, all that stuff, and even nuclear splits. But you cannot destroy them. There is no sense where that exists. And if that is true, that they cannot be destroyed, only formed differently, right, organized differently, then you're still appealing to mystery on the back end of how God would have done a thing. So you can't say Big Bang is how he did it, because, okay, how did he form matter and energy that cannot be destroyed from matter, from non-matter, non-energy, non-source outside, except for himself? He's the source. I understand that's what they say, but it's like, where did he get it? Because he's read the Athanasian Creed. He doesn't have a material existence.
Well, so I'll summarize just a couple points. And the reason I made sure I wanted to include this part about the Big Bang and that part of the discussion alongside the few minutes earlier when they're talking about creatio ex nihilo. For whatever reason, this has been a pet peeve of mine for years now. The doctrine of creatio ex nihilo and how it's discussed with regard to the Bible, in particular. So,
have you read or seen Blake's? It's a 2005, the paper that Robert referenced.
yes,
it needs to be highlighted. People need to read that.
Yeah,
it really
for those in the chat,
really is an
for those in
amazing
the
book, paper.
For those in the chat, it's called "Out of Nothing: A History of Creation Ex Nihilo in Early Christian Thought," and even non-LDS scholars like Thomas Ord, who's a process theologian, actually has picked on that and praised Blake's work. So it's not like just LDS.
If you just do Blake Ostler, Creatio ex nihilo, it's one of the first couple of results that come up in Google.
It's on the first page of the Google
it's
search,
it's a great paper. You need to go through it. And I would read it. I would read it a couple of times.
Yeah.
And
it's scholarly publishing. It's everywhere. Yeah.
And it covers a lot of ground. And so it'll cover largely he's refuting Paul Copan and William Lane Craig. And so a lot of the arguments that they bring up is what is directly being refuted by Blake in this article. But he goes through a number of different sections with respect to the doctrine of creatio ex nihilo, from both the standpoint of what do the biblical texts actually teach or explicate or implicate, and the later model, which in recent years has been more popularized by William Lane Craig, the Kalam cosmological argument, and so forth. And so he addresses all that in that article. It really is fantastic. I will just summarize a couple things here because we've already kind of discussed it. So to use the Big Bang, the modern scientific astrophysical concept of the Big Bang as an explanation for, or as the explanation of what is being explicated in the biblical text, is to make a category error. The authors of the biblical texts are living in a time period where they have no such concept of the Big Bang in the modern scientific sense that we would today. That wouldn't have existed for them. A lot of what is being discussed in creation, in Genesis and elsewhere in Psalms and so forth throughout the Hebrew Bible, those authors would not have had a scientific understanding of the cosmos and its origin. They're looking at it very differently than what modern science is doing today. So we have to distinguish between the two. Also, the biblical texts do not anywhere teach creatio ex nihilo. There is, again, Blake Ostler's article is fantastic. If you want something else that's really good, Gerhard May's book called Creatio ex nihilo is a fantastic volume about the history and development of the doctrine in the second half of the 2nd century AD, which is when it really picks up. And I don't remember, Robert could probably correct me, who the first person to explicate that doctrine was, if it was Theophilus?
Theophilus of Antioch, and later Irenaeus. So
this is happening at the end of the 2nd century, or the second half of the 2nd century AD. You don't see that explicated earlier than that. So even the biblical text in the New Testament, like Colossians, for example, that people would like to point to as saying, yeah, we know the Old Testament isn't teaching creation out of nothing, but the New Testament is, and here's Colossians. That doesn't work either. And Robert, you wanted to say something, and then
yeah, sure. I'll be brief, but even the intertestamental literature doesn't support it as well, and this includes texts that Roman Catholics must accept as being canonical, a la the Council of Trent. For instance, the NRSV of Wisdom 11:17, for your all-powerful hand which created the world out of formless matter, ex amorpho hules. According to scholars who are Roman Catholic, for instance, let me quote the Jerome Biblical Commentary from 2022 that was marked, endorsed by the late Pope Francis himself. I'm not saying it's binding upon Catholics, but it was endorsed by the Pope, so that's pretty important. Commenting on Wisdom 11:17, this is from Karina Martin Hogan on the Wisdom of Solomon. As part of an argument for God's unlimited power, the clause fashioned the universe from formless matter suggests that the author did not read Genesis 1 as an account of creation ex nihilo from nothing. He, the author of Wisdom of Solomon, takes from Genesis 1 the doctrine that all creation is good and loved by God. So the author of the Wisdom of Solomon, according to this Catholic scholar in this Catholic endorsed book, did not teach creation and nothing and did not interpret Genesis 1 as teaching it either. Now, I know some will say, well, this is the second creation a la Copan and Craig, the Cambridge School for the Cambridge Bible for Schools in the 19th century, pretty popular in the UK, tried making that argument as well, but there's no evidence that the author of Wisdom of Solomon is arguing. Oh, go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, so just for clarity, this is the argument that we are recognizing that, in fact, Genesis is not teaching creation out of nothing. However, for the material to be there to create with, God had to create from nothing prior to that point. And so you're just removing yourself a step.
And there's nothing in the text of Genesis 1 or Wisdom 11 or other texts, including Justin Martyr, who in the First Apology 10 and elsewhere uses the same phraseology as wisdom to teach the idea that God created out of pre-existing material. So, and also let me just briefly quote with respect to the patristics, and this is from Gerald Heisted, Passing Beyond the Angels, the Interconnection Between Irenaeus' account of the devil and his doctrine of creation, a doctoral dissertation from the University of Reading, 2017, and it's available online. This is page 46, note 38. Athenagoras, who's in the early 2nd century, seems to assume the basic Platonic account of creation, where the demiurge shapes matter rather than bring it into existence, i.e. ex nihilo, and that's his work, The Defense of Christians 10.2. Scholars are divided about this doctrine in Justin. The relevant passages are 1 Apology 110:58, where Justin speaks of God shaping unformed matter. Notably, Justin does not make a statement one way or the other regarding how this unformed matter came to be. Osborne states, if one looks to the concepts rather than the words, it is clear that Justin would never have considered the concept of unoriginating matter because it contradicted the central belief about God, the sole originator. That Irenaeus so clearly articulates the doctrine of creation ex nihilo, where Justin fails to do so, shows that Irenaeus is willing to push beyond Justin, despite the association of their thought. So he tries to downplay Justin, but most scholars of Justin would say, no, he did not hold to ex nihilo creation. But now I know some will say, well, 2 Maccabees 7, doesn't that teach creation and nothing? But the problem though is that the phraseology the woman uses with respect to creation, it could be read as creatio ex nihilo, but it could also be read as creatio ex materia. For instance, Doran in the Hermenea commentary on 2 Maccabees 7 notes, as other scholars have noted, that the phraseology in the Greek is also use of sexual generation in Greek medical writings as well. So I'm not saying 2 Maccabees 7 disproves creation and nothing, but it's actually could be read plausibly either way. And I think the pre-existing material interpretation is better because of its background in Greek literature before that, but also the idea, say, this woman would actually have, this peasant woman would basically have this kind of a very complex theological idea that would not really come about in the 2nd century. And in Roman Catholic theology, although it was believed, it would not be a dogma until 1215 at Fort Lateran. I think that's an example of reading too much into a stray phrase in 2 Maccabees 7.
Well, I wanted to read on those points. I wanted to read the end. So the final paragraph of Blake's paper is actually really good because it's talking about just kind of the idea that what they're doing is they're going beyond the source material, and then they're reaching rigid conclusions and thinking that everybody else. And the way he phrased it is really good. He says, "It seems to me, therefore, that Copen and Craig have overstated their case. They speak in their essay and book as if anyone who disagrees with them is simply in error and ignorant of the facts, heedless of the overwhelming number of respective scholars who do in fact disagree. They give a false impression of the evidence and fail even to note the necessary distinctions between absolute negation of existence and relative non-being that are necessary to make sense of the texts in the post-biblical era. All in all, their argument for creatio ex nihilo as the universally accepted doctrine of the early Christians simply does not withstand scrutiny." And so I like that because just like what you were saying, Robert, is that they're there is nuance and there could be ambivalence. And yes, the text doesn't affirmatively state specifically one or the other. And so the problem with it is that they're ignoring nuance in order for to support a dogmatic position. And I think that that's why I like Blake's paper is he's very fair about stating Genesis means this, this is what's going on, and to infer creatio ex nihilo, it's not explicitly found. You can't just infer that, read it into the text, and say that's the only logical or reasonable conclusion that can be reached. And so
and many faithful Roman Catholic scholars do admit, like Genesis 1 and other texts do not teach creation ex nihilo. Right. Mark S. Smith, for instance, in the third edition of the German Biblical Commentary and these other works as well, he's actually a faithful Roman Catholic. You know, he even has a commentary from the Collegeville series, which is a pretty like run-of-the-mill center, commentary. Like, and I don't mean this in the bad way, like normie Catholics, you know, who want to delve more into scripture. Very good commentary in the Exodus, but like he's a faithful Catholic, but he does admit, like, say, the opening clause of Genesis 1, for instance, is a construct state. There's pre-existing material that God creates from this, you know, and basically like the standard interpretation of the grammar of Genesis 1, 1 to 2, that's becoming more and more accepted even by like conservatives these days as well.
So yeah. I was wanting to read, because like what actually helps marry this together and support the idea of ex materia is I got this paper from Matthew Berkowitz. He's a Jewish scholar, and this is you can find it on gtsa.edu, Torah, the Myths of Creation. And he says, this is his opening statement. With the celebration of this coming Shabbat, we return to the beginning, specifically to the narrative of creation. Counter to the way many of us were taught in our youth, the Peshat, the literal sense of Torah, demonstrates clearly that God does not create the world ex nihilo, out of nothing. God turns to the primordial building blocks, and from these materials crafts a world and all it contains. In fact, God's essential act over the days of creation involves separation, boundaries, and order, exactly how we teach it with the divisions and so on. The Hebrew vidiel, as in vayavdil, God separated, is an expression that I hope I didn't butcher that, Robert, is an expression that one finds repeated here throughout the first chapter of Genesis. Of special significance is establishing the boundary between the water and dry land. On the third day, God declares, let the water below the sky be gathered in one area that the dry land may appear. And it was so. How may we better understand this gathering of waters? And then he goes on and talks about exactly what we're doing from material division to create. Go on.
Exactly. That's what you find in like Job 38, 4-11, where it recounts the creation. But God, speaking to the creation, uses the analogy of him as the builder, you know, and the craftsman, making like from pre-existing material. One would have to say like God is engaged in some type of divine deception, you know, by giving the impression here that he was creating ex materia, because we all know creatio ex nihilo is central to the divide between Latter-day Saints and lowercase o Orthodox theology when it comes to the anthropology, Christology, or potential, the nature of grace, and a host of other issues as well. So, and by the way, like Blake's paper is great because he also discusses terms like a me untas and what knotting and non-being means in intricity and how it doesn't support the knotting that's required for ex nihilo as well. Mm-hmm. So,
yeah. So there's a couple things going on here, and I have several videos on my channel. If you look through my channel on creation, where I go through a number of these different texts and look at how they use creation. I'm not going to go through all of that here, but just say you can look it up on my channel if you're interested. I also say that Alan and I did a recent episode of our Hebrew Bible study going through Genesis chapter 1, where we talk all about this, and we're reading through the Hebrew text itself and then parsing it out and offering a translation and so forth. So you can find that discussion there as well. Yeah, go ahead, Robert.
Yeah, I'll be brief, but like just in terms of the there's a lot, if not overwhelming, biblical scholarship, even from Roman Catholics, that affirm the depiction of God in the Old Testament is generally anthropomorphic. It's not poetical. That God created ex materia, not ex nihilo. That there's that affirms the biblical authors themselves, including even Isaiah and the author of Deuteronomy 6, you know, and other texts, did believe and affirm the real existence, the ontological existence of other deities and of hosts of other things. There's a lot of scholarship. Now, that doesn't mean we're right and they're wrong, but you would not have this idea by listening to like Heschmeyer and others on this issue. And Joe's is like this. I have my problems with Joe, but I don't think Joe's a dumb guy. I think he's actually a very smart guy. And like as with our favorite pirate here, he's actually a trained liar as well, and he's actually a very good public speaker. He really should know this.
He's just a bad faith actor, and that's what I have to do. Rather than inferring incompetence, and it's bad. Yeah, it's just bad faith. Once you realize that somebody has the capacity to correctly analyze and present material, and they don't, it just like there's a video that was put out by a couple of morons on TikTok, and they're responding to something that was put out by the Stick of Joseph people. And I know I don't watch that channel too much, but I mean they do a fine job with what they do. And these two guys were talking about they were critiquing it, and they're talking about the Trinity and the development of the Trinity on the Stick of Joseph podcast. And these two guys decide, but they're not bad faith actors; they're just dumb. They just have no idea what they're talking about. They don't understand Latter-day Saint theology. Every time they represent it, they straw man it, and it's just obvious that they have no idea what they're talking about. And so in that case, it's like, no, it's not bad faith. It's just you guys don't know what you're doing. But with Joe, it's hard to not reach the conclusion that he's just a bad faith actor.
Yeah. If I may use an analogy, and I'll be quick because I know you want to move on to the different stuff. Imagine, like, say, you were to interview me someday, Jacob, about, say, the topic of Mariology, which I know a lot about, and we were discussing, say, the perpetual virginity of Mary and why I don't believe in it, and I don't think you should as well. It would be disingenuous for me to say, like, to ignore the fact that it appears very early in Christian belief. For instance, you have the Proto-Evangelium of James, which records maybe a pre-existing tradition. So I'm not saying the Proto-Evangelium is a source of it. It may be, but it records, like, in the late 2nd century, a belief that Mary is a perpetual virgin and that brothers and sisters of Jesus were actually children from a previous marriage of Joseph. Or for me to, like, and more and more, like, as the years go on, it becomes more and more like, say, the mainstream accepted belief. It would be disingenuous for me to, like, give a historical overview and ignore that, or ignore, like, say, when discussing the biblical data, that they are believing faithful Roman Catholic scholars who have tried to present arguments against, like, the brothers and sisters passages, or the hey us who until text in Matthew 1:25, or trying to defend the idea, like, when Mary says, how can this be since I know not a man? That's evidence that Mary took a previously avowed perpetual virginity a la Augustine. Now, what Joe should have done is, like, he said, like, yeah, it is true when it comes to creation. There's many faithful scholars out there who do agree with Latter-day Saints on this point, but I think they're wrong because brief discussion here. At least do that. But again, if you're like a goodwill Catholic listening to this, you will get the impression no one believes this. This is, like, unique to us, and we're nuts for believing it. Yeah. Ignoring the fact that there's a lot of academic consensus supporting this. Again, that doesn't mean it's true. The consensus could be wrong. Scholarship could be wrong. But there's a lot of wealth of evidence from, like, say, linguistics, history, and other issues that would at least lend a lot of credibility and plausibility to our unique doctrinal distinctives on an anthropomorphic God, creation ex nihilo, or ex materia, I should say, as opposed to ex nihilo, and a host of other things as well. A good faith actor would actually admit to that and try to interact with it, even if briefly, but we don't have that when it comes to Joe.
And I don't know if it's in one of the clips that I have, but at one point in this section of the discussion, Matt says, so basically the Mormon God isn't a creator. He's more akin to, like, a painter who just takes paint and a brush and stuff and just makes a painting or something like that. And or a builder who builds a house, but he's taking other materials to do it. So he's not a real creator. And this goes back to a very specific point that is made very early on in Blake's paper, that there's an equivocation going on, similar to, like, what we see with other people who like to use the word of God in a particular verse of scripture. They'll take that and say, well, that means or infers the
Logos theology.
Right. And so they're doing the same thing here, where they're just supplying the theology of creatio ex nihilo and infusing that into the very term creation as if that's always been the case, that's always what creation has meant. And it's simply not true.
That real quick, that's my point, that Catholics argue like Protestants, presuppositional apologetics, because they're arguing against us and they don't know how to do it. Sorry, go on.
Well, as James White would say, inconsistency is a sign of a failed argument. And as much as I disagree with James, he's right on that point.
Yeah. And I will say, too, there are many terms that are used throughout the Hebrew Bible that denote some form of creation. The most common one with respect to deity, to God, is bara. But we also see other terms like asa, or bana, or which is, I believe, is the cognate of the Akkadian banu, which just means to build or construct something. Not a single one of these terms, yatsar, for example, is to mold or shape. Not a single one of these Hebrew terms used in the biblical text is ever meant as creation from nothing. They are always taking existing materials and doing something with them.
I wanted to read this. I want to read this section from. So I love the Bible with and without Jesus. I use it a lot. The reason I like it is you've got a New Testament scholar and a Hebrew scholar working in tandem to basically produce a text that is very accessible for most people to read, but also is not filled with theological presuppositions. They're both trying to analyze the text historically, and I really appreciate the way that they do it. So it says, it says, we also miss part of that message because of the translation issues. The opening verse of Genesis is one of the Bible's most discussed, most mistranslated, and therefore most misunderstood text. The well-known King James Version, which translates Genesis 1:1 as, "In the beginning God created the heavens and the earth," is incorrect on several counts. Syntactically, the Hebrew of 1:1 is not an independent sentence, it is an introductory clause, which most of us know from the NRSVs, as reflected when of the NRSVs, "In the beginning, when God created the heavens and the earth," or in the NJPS's, "when God began to create the heaven and the earth." Nor does the opening verse describe creatio ex nihilo, creation out of nothing. Although this idea became prominent in Christian and some Jewish thought, the Hebrew term for create, bara, which in the scriptures of Israel is only predicated of God, does not mean to create something from nothing. And this is the idea that God doesn't have to create ex nihilo to be God, because it says it means to create as only God can create. It also carries the connotation of to separate, and so indicates how God alone brings order to chaos. And so this identification of bara as exclusively the way in which God forms, organizes, divides, and sustains creation is something that is an attribute of deity, and not simply some kind of a thing that somebody can do or something like that. And so this idea of him kind of parodying Latter-day Saints as atheists is just absurd, because we would agree with the Israelite context of these passages.
Yeah, and if I may just very briefly, it is well known that bara, create, is used for, say, God's creation of the people of Israel, e.g. Isaiah 43:15, or his creation of a clean heart, Psalm 51:12. But obviously, this should not be understood as being ex nihilo. However much one loads this word with theological significance, bara does not by itself entail creation out of nothing, or reorganization for that matter. That's Craig and Copan in their essay in the New Mormon Challenge, pages 109 and 111. So at least they are willing to concede this. Also in Isaiah 65:17 in the Hebrew, bara is used twice, of God's bara'im, to butcher the Hebrew, of the new heavens and the new earth. And no matter your eschatology, everyone agrees the new heavens and the earth come from the old heavens and the earth. So it's actually a creation ex materia. So there are explicit statements, as Copan and Craig note here, as well as elsewhere in the Hebrew Bible, where bara clearly means to create from pre-existing material. Because often one will hear from, say, less naive, more naive people who don't really know Hebrew, bara is a special verb used only of God, and it has this connotation of ex nihilo, or subtext of ex nihilo. But that's not the case, even according to defenders of creation ex nihilo. It just means to create. But the subtext depends on one's theological presuppositions or the context of the text. In of itself, it just means the cleave to and to create. with the subtext of, like, say, from pre-existing material at times as well. So, and by the way, as Alan Hansen notes in the chat, and as I mentioned previously in Job 38, the idea of, like, say, God as the craftsman and the like is actually the earliest analogy used historically for God when describing his role as creator as well.
Who is Alan in the chat? Who is
Volgadon.
Volgadon.
Oh, the Volgadon.
Yeah,
okay.
He's not his own name.
Yeah, and I will say the other creation motif that is probably earliest as well is the divine combat motif, where the god in question has to do divine combat with the materials who are personified as some sort of other god or entity like Yam or Mot, who are the sea and death gods, and you have to do divine battle against them. And once Yam is defeated, or Tiamat, to use the Akkadian, then you divide up the body parts of the deceased sea monster, and that divides the waters from the dry land and so forth. And now you have separation of materials to create with. And so there's that motif is incredibly old and is also found in places like Psalm 74 and other places in the New Testament, or the Old Testament as well. For example, Isaiah 27 verse 1 has this very motif of Yahweh defeating Leviathan, the many-headed serpent, the twisting serpent, and whatever. He has to kill the Leviathan to initiate creation, which goes back to an earlier Ugaritic myth of Baal, the Baal cycle. I think it's maybe tablet 4, but in any case, this is very, very old. None of these old traditions throughout the Hebrew Bible have anything to do with ex nihilo creation.
Yeah. It's always to go destroy the dragon, and upon destroying the dragon, order is brought to chaos, and so on. I mean, anyone can look that up. It's Leviathan, it's dragon, it's Yam, it's all these different names, but it's some kind of sea creature that has dominion over the seas that God must overcome, destroy, and by thus doing, release the ability for order to come about. So,
and by the way, in the New Testament as well, Christ is referred to as having victory over death and its sting, and death is swallowed up in the victory of Christ's resurrection. This is infinitely more meaningful when you understand that the god of death in the ancient world had a wide gaping mouth that swallowed people whole, and so it's flipping that on its head and saying, through Christ's resurrection, he is now the one who swallows up death. So there's a lot of play in the New Testament as well, and how they reference things from prior First and Second Temple period Jewish and ancient Near Eastern motifs regarding creation.
Mm-hmm. All I can say is that it's kind of a joke listening to all of us sit and talk that people think that Latter-day Saints are a bunch of ignorant rubes.
Well, we are.
But
this
Travis,
is the only thing I know.
We don't know how many gods, so we're ignorant.
Yeah. Yeah. Hayden left another super chat. Thanks, Hayden. Creation has never meant from nothing. Yeah. Should we move on? I feel like we've beaten this dead horse quite a bit.
Yeah, especially if you have to bail out in about 35 minutes.
I probably got another 30-40 minutes. I
might need to bail in a few. I've got to take my son to a bowling.
Oh yeah, meeting. No. Okay, let's see this clip. Around 50-minute mark. I'll just start it a few seconds early here.
For a fact, it's very hard to get around any of this. And the first way people tried to get around it is you would have later LDS prophets say, oh, well, maybe this was misquoted or misheard. But you have other LDS future presidents, people who were not presidents of the church at the time, but were present and wrote about it in their own journals.
Wait. Is that,
writing,
Adam God.
Respected
wait.
Go ahead, Travis.
Is that smoke because his pants are on fire? No, I'm just kidding. Go ahead. I'm just.
But this is absolutely what Brigham Young was teaching, because they wrote about it in their diaries. And so, just as a sheer matter of fact, this is what he was teaching. We can't get around that. You can leave the what level of authority question to one side and say, if somebody believes that you should worship Adam, that person is an idolater. That person is not a true prophet. You can't teach idolatry and be a true prophet. So Brigham Young is a false prophet. Whatever else may be true, even if he's just privately teaching we should worship Adam.
So glad he figured that all out.
Teaching idolatry, but he's doing it in the tabernacle, very publicly declaring everyone, as a matter of salvation, must be an idolater. And this is damnably false doctrine. And so whatever you think of Joseph Smith, you should at least be able to say, well, his successor, Brigham Young, is clearly a false prophet. And
is this what the breakaways from the original Mormon Church point to? Do they point to that?
I think he said all sorts of stuff, even before this. I mean, that was, I want to say this is 1852. So this is like 8 years after. He'd been saying all sorts of things. He claimed that Joseph Smith taught this doctrine. And a lot of LDS.
Do we want to pause and address Adam God
here? Yeah, go ahead, Michael.
Oh, I was just wondering, because it's really Robert's thing. You know, I just don't want to get too far afield from it.
Oh, it's...
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah, we can address this. Robert, you've done probably the most on Adam God doctrine specifically.
But have you done as much as Joe Heschmeyer?
That's the question. He is
That's the real question.
Yeah.
I mean, he's on Pints with Aquinas as the expert on Mormonism. Yes. Certainly they wouldn't pick a Latter-day Saint to come be the expert on Mormonism.
Well, the broader point that's being made here is that this goes back to the test of the prophet. And I think he even mentions Deuteronomy 13.
Oh, gosh,
18.
Really?
So we can address however much you want of that, Robert, but he does use the example of Adam God to build that out.
When it comes to Adam God, by the way, I spent like a year and a half, including learning Pip and shorthand, by the way, going through absolutely everything, and I hope to revisit the topic soon because people want me to write a book for some reason on this.
You do.
By the way, yeah, and by the way, not to sound arrogant, but I'm probably the LDS apologist who's done the most work, bar none, on this topic. I think the only other person who comes close to me is our friend Jacob Vidrine, who's actually a fundamentalist, but he knows his stuff as well when it comes to this particular topic as well. It is true that at times Brigham did identify the God and Father of Jesus with Adam, and I don't believe, like, say, he was misquoted. The problem, though, is, like, Brigham was not actually that dogmatic about it. Now, before I discuss some examples, with respect to the lecture at the Vale in 1877, it doesn't seem to have been disseminated outside the St. George Temple. I clarified this with Chris Blight, who knows his stuff about Adam God as well, and he's an expert on fundamentalism. He's LDS. There doesn't seem to be very good evidence that the lecture in Fate was known in other temples. There's like some ambiguous evidence from Edward Bunker of Bunkerville. That's his actual name. But some of his criticisms of Adam God could be easily explained by him learning about the doctrine in the temple elsewhere outside the lecture of the Vale. But even like when Brigham Young was often teaching Adam equals God and Father of Jesus Christ, there's other sermons, and we even have the shorthand of that, where he actually makes a distinction of person between God the Father and Adam. For instance, Journal Discourses 1, 238 to 39, speaking of God the Father, quote, has a corporeal body that in his likeness precisely he created Adam. Speaking of the God and Father of Jesus, he's not Adam. In another, elsewhere, we are to tell the people the Father, i.e. the God and Father of Jesus Christ, gave me for their sins, but in Adam all die, but in me, that is Christ, all shall be made alive again. So there's a distinction between Adam, Christ, and God, the Father. There's other instances as well. For instance, he taught Latter-day Saints do not actually have to understand Adam's status. That's October 8, 1854. There's other instances as well. For instance, April 17th, 1853, which, by the way, was also at the Tabernacle. So according to Joe, this makes it ex cathedra, where the former and Latter-day Saints, with their apostles, prophets, seers, and revelators, collected together to discuss this matter, that is the nature of deity. I am led to think there would be found a great variety in their views and feelings upon the subject, without direct revelation from the Lord, is much as my right to offer from other men, that is his opinion, as learned as it may be, as is theirs to differ from me, in points of doctrine and principle, when our minds cannot arrive at the same conclusion. There's a lot of evidence that like people were not dogmatic about this particular point. You also have Eliza Snow, who is well known as being a plural wife initially of Joseph, but later Brigham. And she actually taught that today we worship the same God that Adam worshipped and sang about. For instance, let me just get it up here. This is Time and Change in her poems, and this was published in 1856. Adam, the first created, the great sire of the human race, ancient of days, regained the favor he had forfeited by obedience and ere he left. Speaking of his relationship to deity, there's other instances. She said that the God who talked with Adam face to face is speaking now in the latter days. So the God who's speaking today is actually the God and Father of Jesus, ergo a different person than Adam. Now it is true, like in other instances, Brigham did teach using the language of like I reckon and so forth. Adam, i.e., the Archangel Michael, the Ancient of Days, is the God and Father of Jesus. But he wasn't actually dogmatic about it. What he often disagreed with was people taking their own initiative without he say so to actually openly declare theological warfare, for lack of a better term, on him. And that's one of the reasons why Orson Pratt had disputes with him in April 4th to 5th of 1860. But there's other considerations as well. Again, go through the Mormon Research Project and the issue there in the article. However, and Alan, I know you're online, but you actually shared with me some comments about Deuteronomy 13 and the test of prophets. So hopefully you're okay with me sharing it, because I think this is good. He says Deuteronomy, as you well know, envisions a reality where prophets are ever present. As a result, there will be many true prophets, but also false ones. The question is then, how can you tell the difference? Who is sent from God and who isn't? This is why the so-called prophets test in Deuteronomy 13 and 18 exist, to help people tell who is truly God's messenger and who is representing other gods in line. The false prophets are worthy of death, whether by God or of the people, because they would cause the people to depart from God and break their covenant, leading to their destruction. Adam, God didn't do that. I hope you're okay with me quoting you. I thought that was really good. Now, with respect to the issue, though, like for Brigham, if you were to ask, even when he was identifying Adam with God the Father, are you identifying him with the God of the Old Testament, the God of Deuteronomy, who revealed Deuteronomy 13? He said, yes, that's the reference I have. The problem, though, with Joe is this is the apologetic to get around the Muslims worship the same God. You have that in Noster Aetate 3 of Vatican III, where the claim is not simply Catholics and Muslims claim to worship the same God, or Muslims claim the same worship God as Christians or Catholics. The Vatican II documents and the Catechism and the reception of these teachings by the Magisterium are pretty consistent. Catholics and Muslims worship the same God. They'll simply claim to worship the same God. And that's, again, Noster Aetate 3 and 4, with respect to the Jews as well, who are now Unitarians. But they have the same referent. So they might have like a completely different theology, but they have the same indexical or referent with respect to who they worship, even if they have a weak or non-existent Christology and so forth. I think this is like one way we could actually respond to this. Like Brigham had the same referent, i.e. the God and Father of Jesus Christ. So in of itself, it's not a problem, both for LDS, as a potential internal critique, it's not an issue, but also in terms of its reception history, something one has to keep in mind. So there's a lot more one could say. This is a very complex topic, but that's a basic TLDR. So I hope that makes some sense.
No, can you explain that all again for me, please?
Yeah, sure.
I'm sorry. I was on the phone. What were you not?
Yeah. Rewind.
No, it's.
But on the Mormon or website, there's like 1,000 plus article. Individual records dealing with like various aspects of Adam, God, and also, funny enough, like the earliest Christian commentary of sorts on who the Ancient of Days is, that's Testament of Abraham or Ascension A from circa 80 to 100, seems to identify the Ancient of Days with Adam, because Seth has been cast as the Son of Man in Daniel 7. So there's some really interesting things going on there with Joseph Smith's theology. But even proceeding from this, again, you would not be able to get like a lot of the nuance and a lot of the complexities from Joe's piss poor, and I do mean this really piss poor treatment here, as well as with his discussion with Isaac Hess as well. I really doubt he's actually done any of the necessary readings on the particular topic and its complexities. It's basically the equivalent of me saying like Honorius taught monothelitism in a private letter, ergo Vatican I is disproven. It ignores, like, say, Chapman's response and other issues as well about So equal weights and measurements. But yeah, again, even when it comes to say a topic like this, which is like very complex, no matter how you cut it, again, this is like just a real piss poor treatment. I've seen like other critics do a much better job on this than Joe has.
Yeah, and just for those who want to dive into this, I will say again, the Mormoner website has a fantastic article, which Robert was the primary researcher on. There's 1,000 documents or something that.
Yeah, and I've actually found like a number of other documents since that was published.
Yeah, and if you also want to get a good take from a fundamentalist who does hold to Adam God, Jacob Verdreen has a number of resources as well. So be sure to check those out too.
By the way, Jacob, not to dump this on you, but I think we should actually have that dialogue with Jacob Verdreen sometime about Adam God.
Did that ever work out with? I think you were doing something with Word Radio, or maybe you were helping out with something.
I had a Zoom call with Brad.
Okay.
But then they had Chris Blight on, but unfortunately, that episode wasn't as good as it could have been. Chris is great.
They talked over Chris way too much. It really didn't get explained.
Yeah, I wouldn't.
Yeah. Well,
maybe something for like later in the year.
I'll reach out to Jacob and see if we can get that set up in advance.
I mean, he could get Chris on there too, I'm sure. So.
Okay. Let's move ahead. I only have a couple clips left from this main video. And then
just real quick, I always ask with respect to his claim that Brigham Young was, just definitively a false prophet. I always, with that claim, I always wonder what exactly is the criteria that is consistent with their understanding of Deuteronomy 13 or 18 or whatever that would make Brigham a false prophet. Because the criteria there is what? That you're teaching a false prophet. The prophets that they're denouncing are those that come and perform signs and wonders and then teach you to go after another god, right? But Brigham Young teaches, as Robert just laid out, consistently, with regularity, and with volume, that we are beholden to the Son Jesus Christ and his Father and God, and that is the one we ought to worship, and that they are leading the church through revelation. I mean, none of his teachings are incompatible or inconsistent from what you would expect from a prophet sent by the God of Israel. And if you don't believe me, and this is the thing that's even dumb about the research that they put into this, just go take the old manual from 20 years ago, 25 years ago, the teachings of the prophet Brigham Young, and just go through that. I think the first chapter is, in fact, I just pulled it up. I'm looking at it. It's chapter 4 is knowing and honoring the Godhead, and it goes through and it gives the clear teachings of God of what he understood. And so I just don't think that they're contextualizing Brigham, and they're making this superficial argument of trying to basically say, even if, which to me is a concession, it doesn't matter what you think about Joseph Smith, right? Brigham Young is unequivocally the false prophet. So thus creating this break, this schism between the two. And I think that's ultimately the point. The motive isn't ever to identify or correctly represent what's going on in Latter-day Saint belief systems. So,
well, and just to back up, generally speaking, throughout the biblical text, you have prophets who are speaking to particular groups of people at particular times and offering clarification of direction, instruction, what have you. And that changes over time depending upon who the prophet is, depending on the context of what's happening in Judah, in Israel, what have you. So this changes over time. And then even from the Hebrew Bible to the New Testament, we have further shifts as more is revealed to Peter, for example, with respect to preaching the gospel to the Gentiles and having them counted in the house of Israel and so forth. So if you're going to make the standard is that if a prophet at one time says something that seems to be different or maybe even contradicts something from a past prophet that we hold to as a legitimate prophet, then that invalidates the new prophet.
Right. And well, I would wonder, under that analysis, does that mean that Paul is a false prophet? Because arguably Paul never identifies any kind of consubstantial trinity. He is very explicitly identifying a distinctiveness in being between Father and Son, and is very clear about that in his letters. There is no ontological unity or conforming or unifying the substance of the Father and the Son in his writings. So if he doesn't have a correct understanding of the Trinity, does that make him a false prophet? And so that's what I'm saying is I don't think that they're fairly representing or analyzing any of these questions.
Or is Peter a false prophet for speaking of a spirit prison where work is done for people, inferring then that there must be an eternality of the spirit with coexistence with God, at least the way I understand it. Or all the other things like where he changes to say, "Hey, no more circumcision. Hey, no more up." Yeah.
Or is Jesus a false prophet because
Or
he
is
doesn't
Jesus,
clearly
yeah.
he doesn't clearly identify the consubstantiality between himself and the Father.
Oh, there you
So,
go. Yeah.
he's leading people into error, right? Because you neither
Right.
could count. Yeah.
You know what Jesus says, though, is he says, "Be one with me the way I'm one with the Father," which again to me infers a co-eternality and a possibility or potentiality of becoming
No.
with them like
It's
that.
talking about unifying the substance.
Oh gosh, dang it.
By the way, Jacob, want to do like a speed round for the remaining ones?
I'll go through the last couple clips. We'll just play them, and then whatever we want to chat about for a few minutes after we can. I do want to speak for Sam again, who's in our chat. He says, go ahead.
I would love a screenshot of the picture of Joe that's on the screen right now. I like the face he's making.
Yeah.
Would make some good memes.
It reminds me of the meme with the guy hiding behind the tree. But he says, is there something to be said of the multivalence of quote unquote Father? Or rather, who and in what sense is Father? Catholics forgive those prior to doctrinal development concerning ante-Nicene Christians, including apostles.
As in, like, who God the Father is, or like if Father can be used as, like, say, a title. The latter.
The multivalence, I think, the title being used variously. Yeah.
Yeah, and no, like everyone would agree, like Thomist and other, that the term Father is not a rigid but a facet designator, so it can be used like for various indexicals or reference. So, like, yeah, Jesus could be Father. Especially if you interpret Isaiah 9:6 in some ways, a messianic prophecy where he's like Father of eternity. But so I don't know, maybe I'm just don't know what Sam is getting at with respect to the Trinity, but all sides would agree Father is a multivalent term, as it is for like our theology, where Christ is Father because we're adopted through Christ. A la Mosiah 15, a Benedict sermon, or Mosiah 3, a King Benjamin speech, where he's the Father with respect to being the creator and all that jazz.
Yeah, well, and I'm not entirely sure what Sam is getting at here either. But this last bit here of his question, to me, if I'll answer it how I think he's asking. Most Christians are going to just accept that past prophets in the Old Testament leading up to the New Testament are going to have a certain degree of light and knowledge revealed to them, and that grows over time until we get to the New Testament period with a fuller revelation of Christ and the apostolic age. And so for someone like Joe or another Christian, they would just accept that older prophets in history had a lesser degree of revealed knowledge about the nature of God and so forth than later ones do. And that doesn't seem to be a problem, except for the fact that what does that then say about contemporary prophets at the time of the New Testament and those who might be after. And so if what I'm understanding Sam's question, if I'm understanding it correctly, I think the answer would just be Joe and them just automatically have a cutoff of after the apostolic age, public revelation has ceased. And so we don't need to worry about any future public revelation. We don't need to worry about the question of whether or not somebody is a legitimate prophet in that sense is a non sequitur, because they, for all intents and purposes, don't really exist anymore.
With respect to public revelation, but private revelation is still allowed. Like Sister Lucia would be seen as like a prophetess of sorts, and she's from Lourdes. Not Lourdes. That's Bernadette. She would be Fatima, 1917, and other apparitions of Mary.
No. So I don't know if Sam. Oh, he's got another chat. Let me see if he clarifies a little bit. Okay, he says Father, Son, and Adam are each our fathers, correct? Adam, God, is complex. So so I mean, like, just like Adam is the father of the human race. There's no question there. The Father and the Son in the Godhead are each denoted as Father. So I think that's what he means by multivalence of the term Father.
Okay.
It can be applied broadly in different contexts.
Yeah.
For
Because
each
Jesus,
of the members,
Jesus says that he's the Father a couple of times in the Book of Mormon, and with respect to adoption in Ether 3.
Yeah, he's the Father of the covenant.
Yeah.
Let me play this last clip here. It's about 2 minutes or so, and then we can chat for a bit, and then we'll wrap up. So this is we're going to go to the hour mark, and I'll just play it for about 2 minutes. I'll just start here.
As they understand him in the scriptures, yeah, we would say same team.
So one thing you could say to a Mormon missionary who's beginning to be brought over to the Catholic side is, you don't have to discount this burning in the bosom, this experience you've had with Heavenly Father. I'm not telling you that's illegitimate, right?
Right, yeah, that's absolutely right. And so there is a certain kind of Christian who wants to say, well, look, they're theologically wrong about God, therefore they were never worshiping the true God. But think about it this way. Someone who is Jewish, who doesn't believe in the Trinity, but is reading the Torah and says, I believe that the God who revealed himself to Abraham is the true God, and I await the Messiah, and then you reveal Jesus to them, and they say, I want to follow him. He is the Messiah of Israel, and they come into Christianity. Were they just believe in a complete false religion before? No. Like, take an easy example. They don't even leave the Talmud, all of that out of it. Just imagine it's 125 AD. They've never heard of the Trinity. They're not consciously rejecting it. They're faithfully following God as they understand him as revealed in the Old
Testament. Wait. What? I'm sorry, what?
What?
125? What?
By the way, I know this is like Vatican II theology, but again, let me quote from the...
Did he just admit that in 125 you wouldn't have understood the Trinity?
Yep.
Well, he's talking about a Jew. But like, again, let me quote the Council of Florence about Jews and other schismatics.
No, but seriously, wait. A Jew in 125. Okay, yeah, I don't think that
We're
works.
the first Christians.
Natural theology states you can't actually reason to the Trinity. That's from divine revelation. So there's a host of other things, and like a lot of them would say like the Old Testament was like some type of Unitarian. Basically, look at Trent Horn's debate with Jay Dyer on apologetic methodology. But again, with respect to the people with the funny hats, let me count a ex cathedra document that predates Vatican II. So I know you're going to hate this, Romanists. The Catholic Church, quote, firmly believes, professes, and proclaims that those not living within the Catholic Church, not only pagans, but also Jews and heretics and schismatics, cannot become participants in the eternal life, but will depart into the everlasting fire, which prepared for the devil and his angels. And this is near the end, even if they, quote, have shed blood for the name of Christ, they cannot be saved unless he has remained in the bosom and unity of the Catholic Church. That is why so many traditionalists correctly note there is a rupture between pre- and post-Vatican II theology with respect to the understanding of outside the church, there's no salvation. I know, like, Gnostic authority between say, like, the Muslims and Jews, worship the same God of us, even if they have, like, some kind of errant Unitarian understanding. But again, I'm sure Joe has actually read some pre-Vatican II documents, and he kind of knows this is not really historic Catholic theology, which is why, like, I really sympathize with the SSPX instead of Vacantists, who just want Rome to dump Vatican II. So,
all right, let me finish up with the last minute here.
They understood it. Triune, they're philosophically wrong. They're getting something essentially wrong about God, but they are nevertheless oriented towards God in such a way that we would say, obviously, we're building upon that, not just chucking it in the bin.
I wonder if it would be a little more modest and helpful and less offensive to say, I'm not claiming that any individual Mormon is an atheist. What I'm claiming is, according to your own theology, God does not exist.
Yeah, or to put it a different way, the big distinction between a theist and an atheist is not on materialism. Because even though almost all atheists are also materialists, they believe matter is all there is, that is not essential to atheism. And you'll find atheists who are not materialists, who say there are spirits, and they might be fine with ghosts, they might be fine with the spiritual realm, but they don't think that there's an uncreated creator of everything. On that on the actual fight between atheists and theists, Mormons are on the atheist side of the question. That there is not an uncreated creator of everything.
Let's talk about your.
Okay, he's just going to move on to talking about.
If that's the case, like we have the wealth of biblical scholarship behind us and the grammatical historical interpretation of even text he accepts as being canonical. So
I believe that God is the uncreated creator of everything.
Yeah.
Eternal.
What does eternal mean?
Now you just have to talk about. Now you just have to identify what created means.
Yeah.
No, I believe he's the uncreated creator of everything.
All of a sudden, us saying that we are co-eternal with God means that God is not eternal for them somehow is what I get out of it. Because he has to know that we say we're co-eternal, right? Or is he that ignorant? I don't know, but he
knows that. He knows that. Yeah.
Right. So what is this that we're not trying to debase God in any way because we're saying we're co-eternal with him. What we're saying is that God's promises as given in both the Old and the New Testament are actually true, that he intends to lift us up, that is the work of the cross, to lift us up to be with him and to be like him, that we may be one. I don't understand rejecting that because you want to have this ontological, philosophical debate about the nature of God, wherein he has to remain in this bubble that we are never able to attain to, when that's not the promise. That's not the covenant anywhere in the Bible.
Just from a super simplistic, superficial way of looking at it is they identify a deity that is not capable of actually fulfilling the promise of the atonement, which is to exalt mankind. I mean, if the atonement is simply to rescue us from the tortures of the hell that their God created out of nothing, rather than to perform some kind of elevation or improvement upon the creature, which is really what they're doing. I mean, they're just, I just don't get theologies that think that that's the big gotcha that, well, you don't believe in curatio ex nihilo. Okay.
Yeah. And
you don't think that
really
God, you don't believe in the atonement. Okay.
Yeah. And for all intents and purposes, I think the doctrine of curatio ex nihilo is
abysmal.
Well, yes, absolutely. But I think that this is kind of the jumping off point. The springboard point of differentiating our entire Christologies, our entire soteriology. Everything kind of hinges on, or at least in some respect, hinges on this very point. with respect to the doctrine of creatio ex nihilo, because of that fundamental reason. If God means to exalt us to be like him in any sense of the word, rather than just merely save us from death and hell, eternal conscious torment, which he creates ex nihilo, as you already said, that cannot happen with a doctrine like creatio ex nihilo. So that the reason we spent so much time on that earlier in the discussion, and the reason I wanted to make sure I got that clip in, was this is a fundamental doctrine that divides sort of the trajectories of the different theological traditions with respect to our soteriology, Christology, all of that.
And on the matter of hell and God having created it and all that stuff, it wasn't like the greatest debate you could ever watch, and it wasn't eye-opening at all. However, Hayden Carroll versus Gavin Brito was good to show that, like, someone who claims to be really into their Catholicism just can't grasp how God is love, as is said, and created this eternally conscious torment of hell for so many of his creations out of that love. And I mean, the debate is kind of a joke, and Hayden ends it like he didn't address it. I don't even know what we're talking about here. But
It was really bad.
Yeah, it was. But Hayden makes good points if you just listen to Hayden's arguments at least, right? So just there's something there that we need to address with regard to this God is love creator creating hell out of nothing. And not intending to conquer it for mankind and to save the world, as it says in Scripture.
By the way, for some reason my camera is actually focusing a lot on me. I don't know why.
Oh, it is way on you.
We got a close up on you.
Yeah.
By the way, Catholic theology actually teaches both predestination and also in some way reprobation. Now, God does not reprobate in the way, say, the Calvinists do. But for a very good overview, definitely get this book. But Aquinas himself was like pretty close to John Calvin when it came to this issue. One of my favorite Catholic YouTubers, Scholastic Answers, actually has a really good video on reprobation and stuff like that. So the Thomistic God basically like passively reprobated people, including us, to have a false religion and also to go to hell. So just keep that in mind, you know. And he's outside of time, so there's a host of other things as well.
How's my audio?
Better.
Better than
Good,
before.
better.
Okay.
It's not
Yeah. You guys unlocked the secret level. You unlocked a new character here at the very, very end. But I just want to say that it's been my understanding and experience interacting with more Catholics and classical Christians. Their whole system it's solving for different problems than we typically think in LDS theology. They're trying to solve why is God worthy of worship by making him the reason for everything. Like there's nothing greater or more explanatory than God himself. When we look at the scripture, we look at the revelations, his purpose is to save us from sin and death. So whatever it is that a being must be in order to do that, we believe God is that being. Now, then I would say it's on a classical Christian to explain to me why God must be as maximal and in every sense, the perfect being theology, the actus purus, all of this classical metaphysics, why that is the only acceptable reason as to how God actually saves.
No, and I think that's a great point in the sense that for me, the creatio ex nihilo, and I think that was one of the things I really did like about Hayden Carroll's debate. Have you seen that, Robert? The debate that Hayden had with. Oh man, it's gonna be rough
not
for
yet,
you.
but if I could mention it before we end, just For those who want, like, say, a good overview of the problems of, say, Aquinas' 5 ways and other things like that, episode 69 of my podcast, a critique of a Catholic engagement with Latter-day Saints. Blake Oster and I go through that book, some of the issues with it, and Blake does discuss, in a general overview, some of the problems when it comes to, say, the 5 ways, like Actus Purus, and as well as Actus Purus, I should say. And he also discusses it in volume 1 of his 4-volume now, Exploring Modern Thought series. I kind of mentioned because we only have 5 minutes, so there's no way we can actually discuss, say, the 5 ways or census or other issues like that. So,
yeah. So, I mean, in what I did like about it is Hayden lays out a very good argument, or the argument surrounding the topic of the debate, which was supposed to be omnibenevolence, and how creatio ex nihilo and the nature of their Thomist God doesn't really account for that. And so, whereas Latter-day Saint theology really resolves the issue, well, at least the majority of the issues. There's always issues that will be present, but it resolves a lot of these issues because of the God inviting us into a relationship, offering covenants, consequences for violating covenants, rewards for keeping covenants, which makes sense. And the rewards for keeping covenants are to become like himself. And so the deity that's available, that's capable of offering free will advancement to become what he is certainly less confounding to me than the deity that creates beings knowing they're going to go to physical conscious torment for eternity and does it anyway, as Hayden identified. So I thought that was so what you can do is you can go through the debate, just fast forward through every time Gavin talks, and then just listen to Hayden, and that's what I would encourage anybody that watches that to do.
Yeah. Look, we just took some snippets from this at a minute at a time. This is an hour and a half discussion between Matt Fradd and Joe Heschmeyer. There's a lot of things that we could have discussed, most of which have already been discussed elsewhere. So I will just point to anybody who's coming upon this live stream who has not yet seen some of these other ones. I would suggest all those in favor had their discussion with Tarek Lacour and Joseph Lowell, which was really good.
To point out really fast, Tariq is Catholic, by the way. Doesn't agree with Joe. Go on.
Yes.
Right. Yeah. So that's a good one to watch. I haven't watched very many of them, but if you are going to watch one other than this live stream, that is a good one to watch. And there's a number of assertions made in Joe's description of Latter-day Saint history and theology that could have been addressed today. The focus of today was to take maybe some of those points that were not addressed by some of these other content creators, or not addressed in quite the way that we would have here. So we did want to kind of differentiate and make sure that we could that this live stream would serve the purpose of rounding out some more discussion on some of these other things going on in this Pints with Aquinas episode. And for those who don't know, Joe also did a live stream the other day with Isaac Hess, who is a ex-Mormon, now a Catholic. He's kind of made the rounds here and there. He was on Lila Rosa's show fairly recently.
But he won't debate.
But he won't debate anybody. He's
and we did Robert and I, and who else was there, Robert, that we did a response?
Was that Errol?
Errol. Yeah, that's worth watching too.
Yeah, so he's made the rounds a little bit over the last few years. They did a live stream together on Joe's channel, Shameless Popery, the other day. Most of it was responding to these other LDS content creators' reactions and responses this week. I would suggest watching that live stream as well to see how Joe handles some legitimate critique from other LDS content creators. Like
I have to say, like Joe basically doubles down and is incapable of admitting he was in error. He was even called out by Joseph Lowell in the live chat about his misrepresentation of that interview and the clips he showed.
Right.
Well, and I'll add to that. One thing I appreciated is how, look, Isaac, he's Isaac. But I love that he basically told Joe, if you just changed your prompt to Mormons aren't classical theists, then no one would, there wouldn't be any disagreement.
This would be a non-issue. We wouldn't have an episode.
It's like you just stole Tan's stupid argument for clicks. That's all this is.
Yep.
Yeah,
and on Tan's stupid argument, see my podcast I did with Blake as well on that, and others as well.
And Emerson Green's podcast on it. Yeah.
Emerson's great.
Yeah, he did a good job too. I will say, with respect to the live stream that Joe did the other day, I think maybe the only legitimate contributions to that Isaac Hess made in the entire live stream was his, albeit very minimal, pushback at the end about, Joe, if you had a different paradigm in which you believed that there were living oracles, living prophets who received public revelation, or you were living at a time in which it was understood that there was public revelation, would that not trump the philosophizing of the teachers of the day? And so how do you handle the question of the supremacy of revealed public revelation versus a theological or philosophical developing construct or framework? And so there is that little bit of discussion right at the end of Joe's live stream. I was not satisfied with anything that was discussed, but I will say for Isaac, that was his one contribution the entire live stream that I felt was actually worth diving into. And it's unfortunate that they didn't really get into it as much.
They might do a part 2, and if they do, they might do more of that, and they might try to renounce us. We'll see.
Oh yeah, I'm sure. But yeah, that is the question I wish that he would have spent more time on. That and Joseph Lowell's question that he just barely grazes by with a 10-second clip and then doubles down and moves on. But we'll see. Anyways, gentlemen, it's been great to have you guys on. Let's do this again in the future. I'm sure there will be plenty of more things to talk about. If anybody has anything going on they'd like to plug, I know, Travis, you have not only missionary discussions, you now have a second sister channel.
The missionary
if
brief,
you'd like to plug that as well.
The missionary brief. I'm just responding to requests to do more monologuing, specifically geared towards helping people to analyze and address some of the concerns and questions I often see raised and I get from missionaries that call. And the same thing with Robert. Robert is incredibly helpful with responding to concerns, questions, and issues that missionaries commonly raise, and makes himself graciously available to do that. So I'm just trying to do a channel where I can kind of direct people to people like Robert, and in like channels like Informed Saints that are very informative and helpful and kind of constructing and deconstructing arguments for and antagonistic arguments against the LDS Church, so that missionaries don't find themselves in a no man's land of nobody's helping us. It's good to know that people are there and support and help.
Cool. Thank you, Robert. Everybody should be aware of your channel by now, but do you have anything going on? Anything you'd like to plug?
No, just follow the blog, Scriptural Mormonism, .blogspot.com, Scriptural Mormonism, as well as the podcast. So that's basically what I'm doing at the moment.
I would love to get together with you, Robert, and with Blake. I have a couple topics that I think we could talk about, whether it's Christology or something else. But I also would like to maybe have you guys on to do a review of Kyle Bashir's recent book.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah, I'm currently reading it. Yeah, I'm about 100 and something pages into it.
So I have not got my copy yet. It's ordered. I should get it in the next few days.
It's not. It doesn't piss me off. It doesn't piss me off, but it's not.
Yeah, if you want my, I was thinking like having Blake on my channel, but I'll happily go on yours once you read it as well. I mean, the first half of the book is okay. Like the stuff about Book of Mormon and Book of Abraham evidences is basically non-existent, so it's a bit disappointing. But the second half of the book is crap. Kyle does not provide any exegesis. He misrepresents sources. He ignores a lot of stuff he should know. The second half of the book is just awful.
Yeah, and that's unfortunate. So yeah, why don't we all have a chance to read it here in the next week or so, and then I can reach out and see if you guys want to do something about that.
Sweet.
In any case, those who are watching, a lot of the things that we addressed here, I have already made videos on this channel. In fact, a couple of them recently, like my video on the Shema and Deuteronomy 6:4 is a recent video of mine. Also, for a deep dive in the Hebrew Bible and the Hebrew language with respect to the Hebrew Bible, Alan Hansen, Spencer Krause, and I have started a new series where we're going through the Hebrew Bible, reading it in Hebrew and giving our interpretation and parsing out verbs and all that good stuff for those who are interested in that. I also recently had a Neil Rapley on. So if you haven't seen that, just earlier this week, I had him on. We talked about his paper.
I did. I watched that. It's great. It was really good.
I appreciate that. So that was a good episode. Neil is fantastic. Everybody should pick up the book produced by Fair, the volume edited by Fair called Open Thou Mine Eyes. It's a recent volume, just came out in the last month or two. It has a lot of wonderful articles written by a number of people like Neil, like Dr. Muhlstein and others, Alan Hansen and others who have contributed and stuff. And so, in any case, pick that up. It's a fantastic resource as we're studying the Old Testament this year. I think that's all I have to plug.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah, appreciate it.
Thank you all.
Yeah, and as always, nice seeing all of you.
Yes.
You as well.
You too.
Enjoy bowling, Travis. We'll see you guys.
See ya.
Take care.
See you guys.